Look at the Bible sitting on your bookshelf. There is a massive gap inside it. From the moment Jesus, at 12 years old, taught in the temple, until the time he began his ministry at 30 years old. 18 years vanish without a trace. The Western Church has always said those years were not important or not recorded. But what if an ancient text exists that reveals the full truth about those 18 frozen years? A text that records extraordinary miracles where a young lord carrying primordial power needed only to breathe once to turn clay into life. Or what would you think if you knew there was a text once quoted directly by the apostles in the New Testament, only to later be branded heretical by the religious elites of the West and ordered to be destroyed? It is a forbidden text. It exposes the chilling truth about the rebellion of the fallen angels' beings, who descended to earth, mated with humans, and produced a bloodthirsty race of giants. These records did not fade away because of time. They were deliberately erased because their contents were too dangerous for the powers that wanted exclusive control over your faith. And what if the legendary Ark of the Covenant, the vessel that held the 10 Commandments, did not mysteriously disappear, as Western history books often claim? In truth, this most sacred treasure has been guarded with extreme strictness for thousands of years. Not in Europe, not in the Middle East, but in the only nation in all of Africa that was never conquered by colonial rule, Ethiopia. Welcome to the truth about the Ethiopian Bible, the oldest and most complete Bible in the world. With 81 books, it contains dozens more sacred writings than the version you may be holding in your hands. Why was the West so afraid of these texts that it had to cast them out and ban them? In today's video, we will uncover truths buried for 1,700 years. We will decode the real reason Rome had to cut away sacred writings. We will open astonishingly precise cosmic calendars, stolen powers, and behold a truer, stronger image of Jesus, far removed from the gentle paintings of the Renaissance. Prepare yourself, because when these forbidden books are opened, everything you once knew about the Bible and the history of Christianity will change forever. Before we open those forbidden pages wide, you need to understand one core truth. Why Ethiopia? Why did so many ancient writings disappear from Europe and the Middle East, yet survive intact in this region of the Horn of Africa? The answer does not lie in magic. It begins right on the map. Ethiopia is not like a flat land where every army can easily sweep through. It sits in the Horn of Africa, stretching close to the Arabian Peninsula, standing watch beside the Red Sea, Yemen, Egypt, Nubia, and the ancient trade routes that connected the Indian Ocean with the Mediterranean. But the historical heart of Ethiopia is another story entirely. It rises upon a system of plateaus and mountains so rugged that they almost seem designed for defense. According to Britannica, the Ethiopian Plateau covers most of Ethiopia and central Eritrea, consisting of rugged western highlands and a smaller eastern plateau, split lengthwise by the immense East African Rift Valley. It is one of the most important highland systems in East Africa. Those mountain masses, deep valleys, and twisting landscapes created a parallel world deeply connected to international trade, yet capable of sealing itself off with almost absolute defensive power. That geography turned Ethiopia into an impregnable natural fortress. The Simeon Lasta and Amhara mountain ranges, the deep ravines, and the cliffside roads made entry into Ethiopia's heartland a nightmare for every enemy. Here, geography is not merely scenery. Geography is armor. Geography is a wall. Geography is the very reason countless communities, monasteries, manuscripts, and religious traditions were able to survive the brutal political storms raging outside. But that wall of stone did more than stop ancient armies. It also stopped the machine of colonialism. In modern African history, Ethiopia is an exception. When most of the continent was carved apart and divided by European empires during the colonial era, Ethiopia fiercely maintained its independence and became a great symbol of anti-colonial resistance. Of course, to be fair to history, we need to make this clear. Ethiopia was invaded by Italy and briefly annexed into Italian East Africa from 1936 to 1941, before British and Ethiopian forces drove them out. So when the world calls Ethiopia an African nation that was never colonized, it means Ethiopia never knelt under a long-term stable colonial regime the way much of the rest of Africa did. Even so, if Ethiopia had relied only on mountains and weapons, it could never have become the guardian of the temple of the Bible. Its true strength came from something far deeper sacred memory. Ethiopia is one of the oldest cradles of Christianity in the world. The kingdom of Aksum, located in what is now northern Ethiopia and Eritrea, was already a major commercial power in the first centuries after Christ. Positioned at the throat of the Red Sea trade routes linking Rome, Arabia, India, and Africa, Aksum opened its doors to goods, languages, and most importantly, ideas of faith and ancient writings from every direction. According to the Metropolitan Museum, Ethiopia's adoption of Christianity is tied to the reign of Emperor Ezana in the 4th century. Aksum's location on the southern edge of the Hellenized Near Eastern world was the key to this historic transfer. Britannica also confirms that Aksum was one of the first kingdoms in the world to officially adopt Christianity. This is the truth that will reshape this entire video. Ethiopian Christianity was not a late gift brought by Europeans during the colonial age. It belongs to the most ancient era, the same period as the fierce theological debates around the Mediterranean, when the Roman Empire itself was still struggling to define its own identity. So who ignited this fire? Tradition says that Frumentius, a Syrian Christian, entered the court of Aksum and changed history. He became the first bishop of Aksum, organizing the church there in close connection with Alexandria. Britannica honors Frumentius as the Apostle of Ethiopia, the man who built the structure of the Christian church there as early as the 4th century. From that seed, Ethiopia nourished a Christian tradition unlike any other. It became a perfect fusion of Semitic African Alexandrian, ancient Jewish, and original Ethiopian identity. Instead of using Latin or Greek, they used Ge'ez, an ancient Semitic language, as their liturgical language. Ge'ez was not merely a script. It became a sacred vessel, preserving the Bible hymns, church law, and countless manuscripts painstakingly copied in monasteries. To this very day, Ge'ez still resounds in the liturgies of the Ethiopian and Eritrean Orthodox Tewahedo churches, carrying a stature similar to Latin in Western Catholicism or Church Slavonic in Eastern Orthodoxy. And it is precisely at this crossroads of history that the Ethiopian Bible began to take a path that would make the Western world shudder. The Ethiopian biblical tradition is far larger than the familiar 66-book collection used by Western Protestants. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church presents its canon with Old Testament and New Testament translations drawn directly from the Septuagint tradition. Within it are forbidden names: the Book of Enoch, Baruch, 3rd Esdras, and 4th Esdras. The official website of the Ethiopian Church even boldly declares that the Christian world and the scholarly world owe the Ethiopian Church a deep debt of gratitude for preserving these priceless writings. That is why the Book of Enoch shines at the center of this story. While most of the West forcefully crossed out Enoch, placing it among the pseudepigrapha, or outside the canon in Ethiopia, it is truth. A study on the legacy of First Enoch affirms that although this text vanished from the very land where it was born, It retained full sacred authority in Ethiopia and was perfectly protected in Ge'ez for more than a millennium. This reverses our entire perspective. Ethiopia was not a patched-together or passive land. It was a living archive. While countless ancient Mediterranean writings now survive only as broken fragments in Aramaic Greek or Latin, Ethiopians continued to live with them. They were present in monasteries, in art, in hymns, and in the way Ethiopians understood the bond between God, the angels, mankind, and the end of history. But why were Ethiopians so committed to protecting these texts? Where did that drive come from? To answer that, we must open their greatest national epic, the Kebra Nagast. The Kebra Nagast, or the Glory of the Kings, was compiled in the Middle Ages, but contains some of the oldest memories surrounding the Ethiopian throne. The Collège de France describes it as a 14th century epic that reveals a stunning story. Menelik, the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, brought the Ark of the Covenant from Jerusalem straight to Aksum. Tradition says that the Queen of Sheba, whom Ethiopians call Makeda, traveled across vast distances to Jerusalem to test the wisdom of Solomon. This was not merely diplomacy. It was the collision of two sacred worlds, the throne of Israel and the throne of the south. Makeda left with a treasure greater than all gold and silver she was carrying Menelik, the one who would establish Ethiopia's Solomonic royal line. When Menelik, the mixed-blood son of the Queen of Sheba, and King Solomon entered his youth, he decided to leave Africa and travel to Jerusalem to find his father. When father and son met, Solomon was deeply impressed. He wanted Menelik to stay and inherit the throne of Israel, but Menelik refused. He said, "No, I belong to my mother's homeland." Solomon had no choice but to accept it. But because he wanted his son to build a great empire in Ethiopia, Solomon issued an order that cut like salt into the heart of Israel's elite. He forced the firstborn sons of all the officials and high priests to follow Menelik and serve him. These young Israelites were furious. They were forced to leave their homeland, and worse, they had to leave behind their most sacred treasure, the Ark of the Covenant, the vessel that held God's 10 Commandments. So they devised an insane plan. On the very night before their departure for Africa, this group of young priests secretly crafted a fake ark out of wood. They broke into the temple, switched the fake ark for the real one, and quietly smuggled the Ark of the Covenant onto a chariot and left. According to Ethiopia's epic, the Kebra Nagast, Menelik himself, did not even know about this at first. When they were halfway through the journey and he discovered the truth, he believed this. If God had not wanted it to happen, the Ark of the Covenant could never have been taken away so easily. And so the most sacred heart of ancient Israel arrived on the shores of Africa. Today, if you ask an Ethiopian, "Where is the Ark of the Covenant?" they will answer you directly without blinking. It is in Aksum. More specifically, it is inside a small chapel within the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion complex. You will not see expedition teams there. There are no cameras, and there is certainly no door open for tourists. The Ark is guarded by one single monk. Once a man is chosen as the guardian, he is never allowed to leave the church grounds until the day he dies. Even if the Pope or the President of the United States came, he would not let them in. Western scholars always demand archaeological proof, but Ethiopians do not care. To them, faith is not something that needs to be carried into a laboratory to be proven. And to prove their stubbornness and devotion, the Ethiopians did something without precedent. In the 12th century, the Holy Land of Jerusalem in the Middle East fell into Muslim hands. Christians could no longer go there on pilgrimage. Instead of lamenting, King Lalibela of Ethiopia made a severe yet magnificent decision. If we cannot go to Jerusalem, we will create a Jerusalem of our own. But he did not command churches to be built by stacking bricks. He ordered them to be carved straight down into the earth. Imagine standing on a massive mountain of rock. Instead of breaking stones and carrying them elsewhere, Thousands of Ethiopian craftsmen used chisels and hammers to carve deep down into that single mass of stone, creating great trenches, then hollowing out the interior to form entrances, domes, and pillars. In this way, they created 11 gigantic monolithic churches. They were not raised up from the ground. They were peeled out from the shell of the earth. Local people believed that this amount of work was impossible for human beings at that time. Tradition says the stonecutters worked during the day, and at night, the angels descended to continue the carving. Whether you believe in science or angels, the 11 churches of Lalibela are the clearest physical proof of one thing: Ethiopians do not play games with their faith. So connect the data points. You have a nation with terrain as rugged as a fortress. You have a people who believe they possess the Ark of the Covenant. You have human beings willing to carve apart an entire mountain of stone just to create a place of prayer. And most importantly, except for 5 brief years under fascist Italian occupation, Ethiopia was almost never ruled by Western colonial powers. That is exactly why their Bible has 81 books, while your Bible has only 66 books. When the churches in Rome and Europe sat down together and decided to burn or ban ancient texts out of fear of losing control, the Ethiopians said no. We will keep everything. They were not shaped by Vatican politics. They embraced the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, and countless other writings, brought them into the church and read them in the ancient language of Ge'ez. And now, once you understand how strong this Ethiopian fortress truly is, it is time for us to break through the gate and step inside. What exactly did the Western religious elites fear? What secrets do the Book of Enoch and those forbidden texts conceal about the fallen angels, the man-eating giants, and the apocalyptic judgment of the earth? Let us open the pages that have been erased for the past 1,700 years. The 18 missing years and the true power of Jesus in his childhood. In the familiar Western Bible, there is a massive gap in time that has caused millions of believers to wonder. Everything unfolds like this. We see Jesus born in Bethlehem. We see him at 12 years old in the Temple of Jerusalem, sitting among the teachers of the law and astonishing them with his divine wisdom. Then suddenly, the book turns straight to 18 years later. Luke writes briefly that he was about 30 years old when he came to the Jordan River to be baptized and began his work. 18 years disappear without a trace. There is no scene in Joseph's carpentry workshop. No detail about his teenage years in Nazareth. No clue whatsoever about how his power revealed itself before he officially performed public miracles. The Western elites may be satisfied with this reverent silence, but ancient Christians were not. They wondered if he was the Word made flesh, if the power of the Creator had dwelt in him from the beginning. Then what did that power look like when he was still a child? And this is where a shocking text appears to fill that gap, the infancy gospel of Thomas. This text tells stories about Jesus from around the age of 5 to 12. It was never included in your New Testament, but in the ancient world, it circulated widely in Latin, Syriac, and Arabic. And guess who preserved it most completely? That is right, Ethiopia again. The Ethiopic tradition did not only preserve the Book of Enoch or Jubilees. They preserved an entire collection of stories about the childhood of the Lord in a massive Ge'ez book called Ta'amra Iyasus, meaning the miracles of Jesus. Let me tell you one of the most astonishing stories from this text. Jesus was only 5 years old at the time. He was standing beside a puddle after the rain shaping soft clay into 12 sparrows. Because that day was the Sabbath, the holy day of rest, the adults around him began to complain. Jesus did not stand there and argue with them. He simply gave a command and clapped his hands once. Immediately, the 12 clay birds came alive, began to sing, and flew straight into the sky. Stop here and look carefully at this image. Clay rested in the hands of a child. From that clay, he breathed and gave it life. This story echoes directly back to the moment in Genesis when God formed man from the dust of the ground. It is not merely a sensational miracle story. It is a declaration of absolute authority. Even as a child, Jesus already held in his hands the creative power of the Most High himself. What is worth noting is that this story did not exist only in a few scattered Western manuscripts. Its tradition spread widely throughout the ancient and medieval Christian world. Known translations exist in many languages, including Latin, Syriac, Armenian, Georgian, Arabic, and Ethiopic. The Ethiopic version of the Infancy Gospel of Thomas was preserved in Ta'amra Iyasus, meaning Miracles of Jesus, a popular religious work in the Ethiopian tradition that combines many canonical and non-canonical sources to recount the miracles of Jesus. The scholar Tony Burke notes that the Ethiopic version of the Infancy Gospel of Thomas appears in chapter 8 of Ta'amra Iyasus. Right here, Ethiopia once again appears as a very special archive of Christian memory. The official Ethiopian Bible preserves Enoch and Jubilees in its canon, while the Ethiopic liturgical and apocryphal literary treasury also preserves stories about Jesus as a child. We can see that the Ethiopic tradition not only preserved a broader Bible than the West, but also kept non-canonical Christian texts about the childhood and miracles of Jesus, including the Ethiopic version of the Infancy Gospel of Thomas. A discovery in 2024 made this subject even more compelling. Scholars Lajos Berkes and Gabriel Noki Macedo identified a Greek papyrus fragment in Hamburg dated to the 4th or 5th century as the earliest known witness of the Infancy Gospel of Thomas. This fragment contains the beginning of the story in which Jesus brings clay sparrows to life. And the researchers believe it confirms that this text circulated very early in the ancient Christian world. And that is not all. There is another even more gripping story. The Infancy Gospel of Thomas also tells that a boy named Zeno fell from a roof and died. The crowd panicked, and many people began blaming Jesus, suspecting that he had something to do with it. He did not defend himself. He stepped forward, called the dead child by name, and told him to rise and testify for himself. Zeno opened his eyes, came back to life, and declared before everyone that Jesus had not pushed him. He did not only create life, he also held authority to call life back from death. Now you begin to understand why Rome removed these stories, do you not? The Jesus in these childhood texts is not a passive figure easy to shape into a safe doctrinal structure. He is a being possessing divine power beyond every framework, sometimes causing even his own village to tremble. When he speaks, reality changes. When he touches the earth comes alive. When he calls the dead rise, that power is too primal, too vast, making it difficult for Western churches to place inside a standardized system. That is precisely why this text was not included in the official New Testament. The Orthodox churches prioritized books connected to apostolic witnesses, widely used in worship, and consistent with the theological image of Jesus in the common faith. But Ethiopia did not. The Infancy Gospel of Thomas continued to be read, copied, translated into many languages, and to influence medieval Christian art, but it stood at the margins, not disappearing yet, not entering the canonical center like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. This marginal but enduring position makes it a precious window into how some ancient Christian communities imagined the childhood of Christ. When we place the Ethiopic tradition into this story, we see a familiar pattern. Ethiopia not only preserves major books like Enoch and Jubilees in its broader canon, but also preserves an entire world of religious literature in Ge'ez, where stories about miracles, saints, angels, the Virgin Mary, and Jesus were copied, preached, and honored in spiritual life. Especially if you pay attention throughout the colonial era, Western art consistently painted Jesus with white skin, blue eyes, and soft blonde hair. An image completely Europeanized, detached from his Middle Eastern roots. That image followed missionary movements around the world, creating a default measure of holiness. But look at the ancient churches of Ethiopia. You will see an entirely different image of Jesus. The Ethiopian Bible and Ethiopic apocryphal texts do not provide an official historical description, saying that Jesus had brown skin, curly hair, and eyes like fire, in the sense of a physical identification record. But Ethiopian sacred icon art often presents Jesus, the Virgin Mary, the angels and the saints through an Ethiopian aesthetic language. Large faces, wide open eyes, solemn expressions, darker skin tones compared with the European tradition, and a sense of closeness to the local people. This is a very important phenomenon because it shows that each Christian culture has expressed Christ through an image its own community could recognize and revere. This is not an issue of anthropology. It is a strong spiritual declaration. The Savior is not imprisoned inside the narrow mold of any empire. He is the Savior of all nations. So when we connect these points together, the West preserved the 4 official Gospels and left a great silence around the youth of Jesus. Apocryphal texts such as the Infancy Gospel of Thomas tried to step into that silence with stories about his creative and healing power as a child. The Ethiopic tradition preserved those stories in the Ge'ez literary treasury, such as Ta'amra Iyasus, and Ethiopian art has long refused to let Christ be confined inside the pale white face of colonial Europe, instead honoring him through an image closer to the life and soul of African people. Therefore, the question is not only, what did Jesus do during the missing years? The deeper question is, who was given the right to shape his image in the mind of humanity? Who decided which stories were told, which images were hung in churches, which skin colors were considered holy, which texts were read, and which traditions were pushed to the margins? Ethiopia, through its Ge'ez manuscripts, its rock-hewn churches, its sacred icons, and its ancient Christian memory, answers that question in a powerful way. Faith in Jesus did not begin in Europe, and his power cannot be reduced to serve any empire. He is the Word who was there from the beginning. He is the one who touches the earth and gives life. He is the one who calls the dead to stand. He is the one whom every nation has the right to worship through its own voice colors and sacred memory. But power on earth is only half the story. When you turn deeper into the archives of the Ethiopian Bible, you will discover that they did not only preserve the truth about the physical world, they also held one of the most intense and detailed maps of the invisible realms, heaven and hell. Forget the image of heaven as a gentle palace with a gold-plated throne, an image carefully designed to reflect the luxury of the Roman emperors. In the ancient texts preserved by Ethiopia, especially the book known as the Ascension of Isaiah, the structure of the cosmos is described as far greater and far more severe. It is a journey through 7 layers of blazing light. This book reveals a shocking truth about the mystery of the Incarnation. In order to descend into the world and save mankind, Jesus did not come down on a shining chariot. He carried out a cosmic-scale infiltration mission. As he passed through each heaven, he had to gradually set aside his divine glory, disguise himself and make himself smaller in order to slip through the surveillance system of demons and the ruling powers of the air. He humbled himself to the absolute lowest point entering this fallen world without the enemy realizing it. This was not a casual descent. It was a top-secret operation of heaven. And if heaven is that vast, then hell is a nightmare so real that it terrified the West. The 7-layer structure of heaven and the graphic vision of hell. The 2 texts that most clearly express this power are the Ascension of Isaiah and the Apocalypse of Peter. One book takes us upward through the 7 heavens. The other forces us to look straight down into the punishments of hell. One describes how Christ descended into the world through the heavens, hiding his divine glory in order to complete the mystery of salvation. The other describes how every soul must face the consequence of its own actions. And both show why many ancient texts once made later religious leaders afraid. They give the reader a very strong sense that heaven-hell judgment and salvation are living realities, direct realities, and realities that stand beyond every layer of earthly power. First, there is the Ascension of Isaiah. This is an ancient Christian apocryphal work with a complex structure combining traditions about the martyrdom of the prophet Isaiah, with a visionary section in which Isaiah is led by an angel through the heavens. The complete version survives mainly in Ethiopian Gaz, while fragments and translations also exist in Greek, Coptic, Latin, and Slavonic. This makes Ethiopia an extremely important land for the history of this text. If the Ge'ez tradition had disappeared, humanity today would possess only scattered fragments of a vision that once had a powerful influence in ancient Christianity. In the visionary section, Isaiah is taken through 7 heavens. Each higher level contains greater glory, stronger light, and a more majestic angelic order. As Isaiah ascends, he sees the differences between the heavens. The angels in the lower heavens do not possess the same glory as the angels in the higher heavens. The higher he goes, the purer the worship becomes, until he enters the 7th heaven, where the glory of the Most High, the Beloved One, that is Christ, and the Holy Spirit are present in heavenly order. Scholars describe this section as Isaiah's journey through the 7 heavens to witness worship glory and the plan of salvation before Christ descends to earth. What makes the ascension of Isaiah especially remarkable is the way it tells of the descent of Jesus. The text describes the Beloved One descending through each heaven, and at each level he hides his glory by taking on the form appropriate to the angels of that level. As he descends lower, he continues to conceal himself so that the powers ruling the lower realms and the world recognize him as a being of their own level, instead of seeing the full glory of the Son of God. In short, the incarnation is told as a secret sacred mission. Christ descends in order to enter the world, but the evil powers realize who he is too late. This is a powerful vision. In the 4 official Gospels, we see Jesus born in Bethlehem, raised in Nazareth, baptized, preaching healing, crucified, and resurrected. But the ascension of Isaiah lifts the curtain higher, allowing the reader to glimpse the heavenly backstage of the incarnation. Before Jesus lay in the manger, he had passed through the heavens. Before he walked the roads of Galilee, he had descended through the angelic orders. Before mankind recognized him, the invisible powers had already been drawn into a mystery they could not control. For Ethiopians and the Ge'ez communities that preserved this text, heaven was therefore no longer a simple decorative picture behind a throne. It was a living structure, layered, ordered, and filled with glory, where each level of light reflected a closer degree of nearness to God. The path of Christ ascending becomes the path of salvation. The path of Isaiah ascending becomes the journey of witnessing the truth. And the reader is placed between those two movements. God descends to save man, while man is invited to look upward and recognize where true salvation comes from. But if the ascension of Isaiah lifts our eyes toward the 7 heavens, the apocalypse of Peter forces us to look straight into the abyss of judgment. This is one of the most famous ancient Christian apocalyptic texts. It was composed in Greek around the early 2nd century and was once widely read and mentioned in both the East and the West. Some communities regarded it as having great authority. The Muratorian canon mentions the apocalypse of Peter and says that there were people who wanted to read it in the church, though hesitation also appeared very early. Clement of Alexandria quoted it by name, and the historian Sozomen in the 5th century even recorded that some churches in Palestine still read this text every year on Good Friday. In other words, the Apocalypse of Peter once stood very close to the doorway of the New Testament. It was not an obscure marginal text from the beginning. It was once read, once respected, and once considered useful for warning believers about the day of judgment. But over time, it was pushed outside the official canon of most of Christianity. The reasons are layered debates over apostolic origin, uneven use among the church's images of hell that were extremely intense, and certain theological elements that made later leaders cautious about placing it on the same level as the four Gospels and the Revelation of John. The lost journey of this book is also full of drama. From the Middle Ages until the late 19th century, the Apocalypse of Peter was known mainly through quotations by ancient authors. Then during the excavation season of 1886 to 1887 at Akhmim in Upper Egypt, a fragmentary Greek text was found in the tomb of a Christian monk. After that, Ethiopic manuscripts in the Dabadi collection were published, and in 1910, the scholar M.R. James realized that these Ethiopic manuscripts contained a version of the Apocalypse of Peter. Another independent Ethiopic manuscript was discovered on the island of Kebra in Lake Tana in 1968. Once again, Ethiopia steps into the story as the keeper of memory. The surviving Greek texts are only fragments. The Akhmim text is shorter and shows signs of editing. Many scholars believe that the Ethiopic version preserves a form closer to the original text in many places because it is longer, matches certain ancient quotations better, and fits the number of lines recorded in ancient lists. The content of the Apocalypse of Peter immediately makes the reader understand why it once caused such shock. In the Ethiopic version, the Apostle Peter receives a vision of hell and heaven from the risen Christ. The text describes the day of judgment, the resurrection, and then shows Peter one by one the places where souls are judged. What makes it especially striking is that the punishments in hell are designed according to specific sins. This is the principle of each person according to what he has done. Scholars note that the idea each person according to what he has done appears many times in the Ethiopic version and becomes the central theme of the entire text. Blasphemers are hung by their tongues because it was their tongues that insulted God. Those who distort justice are thrown into a pit of fire because they turned righteousness into a tool of evil. Murderers and their accomplices are surrounded by venomous snakes and worms, while the souls of those who were killed look upon that sentence and confess the righteousness of God. The New Advent Translation records the scene of murderers being cast into a narrow place full of fierce serpents tormented by those creatures, while the souls of the victims stand watching and say that the judgment of God is righteous. The wealthy who ignored the poor are clothed in filthy rags and pierced by sharp burning stones. Those who lend money at interest stand in a lake of blood and filth. Those who lied and caused the righteous to die suffer punishment in their mouths and bodies. Idol worshippers are tormented by fire. Those who use their bodies' words, money, power, and lust to harm others all receive judgments directly connected to the part of life they used to commit sin. The power of the Apocalypse of Peter lies in that specificity. It does not speak of hell in vague concepts. It turns sin into images. It makes the reader see the consequence of each action. A lie has the punishment of a lie. An act of murder has the punishment of murder. A greedy life has the punishment of greed. A crime hidden beneath the earth is finally dragged before the court of God. And here we need to correct the point with precision. To say that Rome banned the Apocalypse of Peter to protect indulgences would be historically inaccurate. This text was pushed outside the canon many centuries before the medieval system of indulgences developed into a major issue in the Western Church. The more reasonable historical cause lies in the formation of the canon. The Church increasingly prioritized books with widely recognized apostolic origin, books read broadly across many regions, books that fit the rule of faith, and books transmitted through stable liturgical use. The Apocalypse of Peter had local authority, but it also met hesitation very early, as the Muratorian canon itself shows. Even so, what makes this text dangerous in a moral sense remains very clear. It places each individual directly before the judgment of God. In the Apocalypse of Peter, the human soul cannot hide behind reputation, wealth, office, nationality, or the protection of any earthly system. The murderer faces the sin of murder. The deceiver faces the sin of deception. The rich person without compassion faces his own lack of compassion. The idol worshiper faces the idol he has chosen. The sentence is not vague or general. It goes straight into each action, each desire, each word, and each choice. This is why the book has such terrifying power to shake the reader. It gives the reader the sense that the day of judgment is deeply personal. God sees every deed. His justice enters every detail. Everything hidden before men is laid bare before heaven. In a world where people can buy connections, use money to escape responsibility, use office to cover sin, and use religion to create a moral mask, the Apocalypse of Peter declares something very direct. The soul will stand before God in the truth of what it is. Therefore, the terror of this book lies deeper than its images of hell. The lakes of fire, venomous snakes, abysses, hanging tongues, burning bodies, and punishments according to each sin are only the outer layer of imagery. Inside is an extremely strict moral principle. Mankind is responsible before God for the very life each person has lived. When placed beside the ascension of Isaiah, the picture becomes more complete. The ascension of Isaiah shows the order of heaven. 7 layers of glory, angelic ranks, and the secret descent of Christ to defeat evil powers from within history. The Apocalypse of Peter shows the order of judgment. Each soul, each sin, each sentence, each consequence of a life that chose to resist righteousness. One text lifts the reader upward toward the path of salvation. The other forces the reader downward to look at the consequence of sin. And Ethiopia, through Ge'ez, through monasteries, through manuscripts, through the endurance of ancient Christian tradition, preserved both streams of memory within its sacred literary world. That is why these texts matter for the subject of the Ethiopian Bible. They show that Ethiopia did not merely preserve a few strange extra books. Ethiopia preserved a vast, ancient Christian imagination. Where heaven has structure, hell has form, angels have roles. The incarnation has cosmic depth, and the day of judgment carries direct weight upon every human being. In the modern Western tradition, many people are taught faith in a softer, more abstract, safer way. Heaven becomes a general place of comfort. Hell becomes a difficult concept to mention. Judgment becomes a subject easily avoided. But ancient texts like the Ascension of Isaiah and the Apocalypse of Peter leave an entirely different feeling. They say that the invisible world has real order. Sin has real consequences. Christ truly descended through the heavens, and every soul will be judged according to its truth. By this point, perhaps you understand why were texts like these so strongly forbidden by the Church. Because they revealed too much truth. Because they described the heavens, evil spirits, hell, and judgment with a level of detail that later theological systems found difficult to control. Because they reminded every individual that before God every mask falls away. And because they reminded people that early Christianity once possessed a world of imagination that was wider, hotter, stronger, more filled with angels, and more filled with warnings than the neat version many believers hear today. Ethiopia preserved those fragments of memory. The Ge'ez manuscripts quietly passed through many centuries. Monks copied them by candlelight, communities read them as warnings for the moral life. And then when the Akhmim Dabadi and Lake Tana manuscripts were identified by modern scholarship texts that seem to have fallen out of Western memory began to return. They returned with a very clear message. The story of ancient Christianity is far broader than what modern people usually know. Heaven in those texts is a journey through layer upon layer of glory. Hell is a court where each sin is called by its proper name. And between those two realities stands the human being, living each day through choices that will follow the soul before the throne of God. This is the true power of the texts Ethiopia preserved. But if the visions of heaven and hell show us the final destiny of the soul, then there is another book in Ethiopia's archive that exposes the horrifying origin of all sin on earth. Ask yourself this: why did God have to use the Great Flood to drown all of humanity? The Western Bible only explains it in very general terms, saying it was because mankind became wicked. But where did that wickedness come from? Why did human beings suddenly know how to forge swords and spears, use sorcery? And why did the earth become corrupt so quickly that it could no longer be saved, forcing God to press the restart button on the entire world? The Western religious elites removed the answer because it was too unimaginable. It is time for us to open the most forbidden, famous, and troubling book that Ethiopia protected. The Book of Enoch reveals the horrifying truth about the fallen angels and the giants. In the entire Ethiopian Bible, perhaps the most shocking book is the Book of Enoch. This is the text most Western Christians have only heard of as a vague name. Some call it an apocryphal book. Some view it as an ancient Jewish legend. Some read a few passages about the fallen angels and quickly close it because it feels too strange, too intense, too different from what they were normally taught in church. But to Ethiopia, Enoch is not some strange piece of literature sitting on the margins. In the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo tradition, the Book of Enoch is preserved as part of the Bible, standing within the broad stream of sacred scripture that Ethiopians guarded in Ge'ez for centuries. The official website of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church lists Enoch and Jubilees among the canonical books of this tradition, making Ethiopia one of the most important Christian communities that still preserves Enoch as sacred scripture. To understand why this book carries such weight, we must go back to the period before Christianity into the Jewish world of the Second Temple era. This was a time when the Jewish people lived amid the memory of exile. The pressure of foreign empires, hope for the Messiah, and burning questions about angels, evil spirits, judgment, the heavenly calendar, the end of the world, and the righteousness of God. The Book of Enoch emerged within that very atmosphere. It is not a single work in the modern sense, but a collection of several parts composed across different periods, including the Book of the Watchers, the Book of Parables, the Astronomical Book, the Dream Visions, and the Epistle of Enoch. First Enoch is a work belonging to the ancient Jewish apocalyptic movement, preserved in full in the Ethiopic translation from Greek, while other parts of the Greek and Aramaic traditions survive only in fragments. The central figure of the book is Enoch, the seventh generation after Adam, the father of Methuselah, and the great-grandfather of Noah. In Genesis, Enoch appears only briefly. The Bible says he walked with God, and then God took him because he was no more. Those few short lines led the ancients to ask a great question. What did Enoch see? Why was he taken from the world in such a special way? What made him a figure standing between heaven and earth? The Book of Enoch answers with a vast vision. In this text, Enoch is not merely a righteous patriarch. He is taken into the hidden regions of the heavens, where he witnesses the places where angels operate, sees the storehouses of the winds, the storehouses of the stars, the place of judgment, the prison of rebellious beings, and receives the mission of delivering God's warning to the fallen angels. And it is here that the book opens its most terrifying section, the story of the Watchers. The Book of Enoch expands on a very short but deeply mysterious passage in Genesis chapter 6. where the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful and took them as wives. Afterward, the Nephilim, the heroes of old, appeared on the earth. In the familiar Western Bible, this passage passes by in only a few verses and then quickly moves to the wickedness of mankind and the great flood. But the Book of Enoch stops right at that crack and opens the entire spiritual background behind it. According to the Book of the Watchers, 200 angels, called the Watchers, abandoned their assigned positions. Their leader was Semyaza, or Semjaza. They saw the daughters of men were drawn into desire and together swore an oath on Mount Hermon. The detail of swearing an oath is very important because it turns this fall into an organized rebellion. They did not merely sin individually. They collectively decided to break the boundary between heaven and earth. From that forbidden union, a race of giants was born, the Nephilim. Some ancient translations of First Enoch chapter 7 say that these giants were 3,000 cubits tall. If calculated mechanically, according to the cubit measurement, that number could reach more than 1,000 meters, far beyond any biological possibility. In some modern retellings, the number is reduced to around 450 meters. But to write accurately, we need to state clearly that this is an apocalyptic number or a textual transmission issue used to emphasize the abnormal and terrifying nature of this race, rather than an anthropological measurement in the modern scientific sense. What is certain in the narrative of Enoch is this: the Nephilim are described as gigantic violent beings outside the natural order, and their appearance drove the pre-flood world into irreversible chaos. The Book of Enoch says that the Nephilim consumed all the produce of human beings. When there was not enough food left, they turned against animals, the birds of the sky, the beasts of the field, reptiles, the fish of the sea, and finally began to devour human beings themselves. Blood was spilled upon the earth. The cry of humanity rose up to heaven. This is a very different picture from a simple telling that human beings became wicked. Enoch shows that the world had been violated at its most basic structure. Angels crossed the boundary, humanity was poisoned with forbidden knowledge, giants spread violence, and the whole of creation was dragged into a moral and biological crisis. But the rebellion of the Watchers did not stop with the birth of the Nephilim. They also taught humanity forbidden knowledge. This is one of the most dangerous sections of the Book of Enoch. Azazel taught human beings to make swords, knives, shields, and armor. He taught the mining of metals, the making of jewelry, the use of antimony to paint the eyes and beautify the eyelids, and the use of precious stones and colored dyes. Other Watchers taught spells, magic, astrology, the observation of stars, the signs of the moon, the cutting of roots, the enchanting of minds, and the interpretation of omens. In modern language, Enoch is describing the moment knowledge was separated from morality. Technology, weapons, adornment, symbolic power, divination, and spiritual manipulation entered humanity before mankind had enough moral foundation to use them properly. This gives the Book of Enoch an extremely modern warning power. The problem is not knowledge itself, but its origin, purpose, and the way human beings use it. A blade can be used to cut bread, but it can also become a weapon. Metal can create tools, but it can also create armor for war. Cosmetics can be an art of caring for the body, but in the context of Enoch, they are tied to seduction, pride, and the manipulation of desire. Astrology and magic turn the sky from a place that praises the order of God into a tool through which human beings seek control over destiny. That is why Enoch describes the knowledge of the Watchers as a spiritual contamination. When the cry of the earth and humanity rose up, the archangels looked down. Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel saw violence, bloodshed, chaos, and ruined souls. God commanded judgment. Raphael was sent to bind Azazel and cast him into a dark place in the wilderness until the day of judgment. Gabriel was sent to deal with the children of the Watchers. Michael was commanded to bind Semyaza and his companions, imprisoning them in the valleys of the earth until the end. Enoch became the one who delivered the message of judgment to the fallen angels they had once been assigned to intercede for mankind. But now mankind had to plead for them. That plea was rejected. This is a chilling reversal. Beings who once stood above human beings now had to hear a righteous human proclaim the sentence of God. Those who once taught humanity forbidden knowledge were now stripped of their freedom. Those who once opened the path for violence were now imprisoned to await the day of judgment. And in the logic of Enoch, the great flood is no longer merely a massive natural disaster. It is God's cleansing act against a world distorted by the sins of both humans and angels. That is why the Book of Enoch is so shocking. It explains the cause of the great flood in an extremely direct way. It does not merely say mankind became evil. It says the boundary between heaven and earth was broken. It says the violence on earth had a spiritual origin. It says knowledge can become poison when given by rebellious beings. It says that later evil spirits came from the souls of the dead giants because they were born from the mixture of spirit and flesh. This is the difference of the Book of Enoch. It clearly explains the origin of demons on earth. Something the Bible mentions very little, or something that was reduced in order to keep people from knowing the truth, so that they would not become alert to the schemes of evil spirits. But Enoch is not only a book about fallen angels. It also contains profound visions of the Messiah. In the section known as the Book of Parables, Enoch sees a figure called the Son of Man, the Chosen One and the Righteous One. This figure is placed before the Lord of Spirits, prepared before the world was created, and will sit on the throne of glory, judge kings and rulers, overthrow oppressors, and bring righteousness to the chosen. This is why many Christian readers see in Enoch a powerful echo pointing toward Jesus, especially because the Gospels also use the title Son of Man for Christ. However, this section needs to be stated very accurately. Scholars still debate the dating of the Book of Parables. Many place it around the 1st century BC or the 1st century AD, very close to the time of Jesus. Others are more cautious when evaluating a direct connection. What is certain is that Enoch shows that within the ancient Jewish environment, there already existed a highly developed image of a heavenly righteous figure entrusted with authority to judge and save. For Christians, that image makes Enoch one of the most important texts for understanding the messianic atmosphere before and around the time of the New Testament. So what exactly happened to the Book of Enoch? Why did a book holding such core secrets survive intact in Africa, yet vanish completely from the Bible you are holding in your hands? Many people still imagine that some religious leader in Rome signed a secret decree, and then soldiers rushed out to burn every copy of Enoch in a single night. The truth is not like a Hollywood movie. The truth is colder and more insidious. The Book of Enoch was not burned alive. It was slowly suffocated to death. Look back at history. In the earliest days of Christianity, Enoch was an extremely respected book. The author of the letter of Jude in the New Testament even directly quoted Enoch's prophecy about the day of judgment. Great early scholars such as Tertullian defended its value. But when Western religious institutions began to grow stronger, reshape authority, and pull everything into one framework, they realized that the Book of Enoch was a ticking time bomb. Why? Because its content could not be controlled. Its raw stories of angels having desire, evil spirits wandering the earth, and the multi-layered structure of the cosmos shattered the neat, safe doctrinal frame that the elites wanted to build. This book went too deep. It was too intense. So instead of banning it loudly, they chose to isolate it. Across centuries of councils, textual filtering, and theological debates, Enoch was gradually pushed away from the center. By the 5th century, it had been completely moved from the Western list of sacred books. The result of this silent purge was truly devastating. The Book of Enoch was removed permanently from the Bible. Clergy stopped mentioning it from the pulpit. The memory of millions of believers was wiped clean of it. The only book that could clearly explain the mystery of the fallen angels, the roots of the Nephilim monsters, and the true origin of evil was suddenly labeled dangerous, outside the mainstream, and forbidden. The entire Western world turned its back and buried this truth in exchange for a theological system easier to manage. But one land refused that compromise. In Ethiopia, this book was never forgotten. On the Ethiopian highlands, in monasteries within the Ge'ez tradition, in the life of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, the Book of Enoch continued to be copied, read, explained, and honored. This matters so much that if Ethiopia had not preserved the Ge'ez version, modern humanity might know Enoch only through Greek and Latin fragments and ancient quotations. The Ethiopic version became the living body of the book. It is the reason Enoch could return to the modern world as a relatively complete work rather than as a ghost of textual scholarship. Then in the 20th century, an archaeological event changed everything. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered at Qumran from 1947 to 1956, scholars found many Aramaic fragments of Enoch in Cave 4. The Israel Antiquities Authority currently preserves the 4Q Enoch manuscripts as Aramaic texts from Qumran Cave 4 that do not belong to the official Hebrew Bible group. That discovery was extremely important. It proved that Enoch was not a late medieval Ethiopian creation. It had deep roots in the Jewish world of the Second Temple period. It had once been read, copied, and preserved near the time of Jesus. The Qumran fragments show that important parts of Enoch, especially the Book of the Watchers and other Enochic traditions, circulated in Aramaic before Christianity was formed. In other words, Ethiopia did not create Enoch. Ethiopia preserved an ancient stream of tradition that many other places lost. That was the moment Enoch returned. A book once regarded as marginal suddenly had ancient archaeological evidence lying in the Judean desert. A text once doubted by many Western traditions suddenly appeared beside biblical manuscripts and ancient Jewish writings. A story about Watchers Nephilim and forbidden knowledge was no longer only a strange Ethiopian legend, but a real part of the intellectual world of Judaism before the New Testament. So why is the Book of Enoch dangerous? It is dangerous because it makes Genesis chapter 6 far too specific. It is dangerous because it says that the corruption of humanity before the Great Flood was connected to a rebellion in the angelic realm. It is dangerous because it explains the origin of evil spirits through a powerful story. Spirits emerging from the dead bodies of the Nephilim continued to wander upon the earth. It is dangerous because it shows that knowledge can come from an impure source and that a civilization can become advanced in technology while decaying in morality. It is dangerous because it makes religious authorities struggle to control the story. If believers read Enoch, they will look at the Bible with a larger map. Angels, Watchers, Azazel, Semyaza, Mount Hermon, the heavens, the sacred calendar, evil spirits, judgment, and the heavenly Son of Man. They will realize that early Christianity and Second Temple Judaism once thought about the invisible world with a far greater intensity and depth than the neat version many modern churches often present. But precisely for that reason, the Book of Enoch is also very important for believers today. It reminds us that sin is not only a collection of small individual acts. Sin can become a system. Sin can enter knowledge, technology, war, beauty, power, desire, and education. It reminds us that God sees both the visible and invisible parts of history. It reminds us that the forces that once broke his boundaries will not escape judgment. It reminds us that every civilization that uses knowledge to feed violence will eventually have to stand before the court of the Most High. Do not think the Book of Enoch is only a dusty autobiography from the ancient world. More than ever, its message is echoing straight into our modern world like a red emergency alarm. This book exposes a brutal law and raises cold, sharp questions for our own age. What happens when humanity holds enormous technologies and knowledge in its hands, but throws away the moral compass completely? What happens when those who hold power arrogantly trample upon the forbidden boundaries established by God? What happens when human society repeats the cruel nature of the Nephilim giants, where the strong mercilessly seize from and devour the weak? When the whole world beats its chest in arrogance and challenges the Creator, the Book of Enoch shatters every illusion of safety we have. It affirms an inescapable truth. The final judgment of God is not an abstract theological concept to be discussed, nor is it a fairy tale set in some distant future. It is a storm that has already taken shape, and it is rushing straight toward us as the day of judgment comes. But how can you prepare for that storm if even the timeline you are living in is also a lie? What would you think if I told you that the calendar hanging on your wall has actually been manipulated to make you walk out of rhythm with the Creator? That is when we must open another forbidden book that Ethiopia has defended with its life and preserved in full, the Book of Jubilees. This book exposes a shocking secret about time. God did not leave humanity to blindly calculate days and months on its own. Through the angels, He handed Moses a perfect and absolutely precise solar calendar, exactly 364 days, divided perfectly into 52 complete weeks. And not only that, the Book of Jubilees also reveals one of the most painful theological gaps that the Western Bible cannot clearly explain if the great flood swept away all sin and drowned the Nephilim monsters. Then why is our world today still filled with demons and temptation? Let us dig deeper and uncover the answer right now. The perfect cosmic calendar and the existence of demons. If the Book of Enoch pulls back the curtain on the Watchers, the Nephilim, and the spiritual cause of the Great Flood, then the Book of Jubilees enters another deep layer of that same ancient world time. This is the book that makes the reader feel that all of human history does not flow at random. Every human life, every covenant, every holy feast, every major event from Genesis to Moses is placed inside a sacred structure that has already been measured. In Jubilees, history is like a giant scroll, and time is made of squares arranged by God with absolute order. Human beings may forget the holy day. Kingdoms may distort worship, religious powers may fight to control the calendar. But in heaven, time still belongs to God. The Book of Jubilees is also called Little Genesis because it retells much of the story from Genesis to the first half of Exodus. But its way of telling the story is completely different from the familiar Genesis. In Jubilees, Moses does not only receive the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai, he also receives a sacred history from the Angel of the Presence, who is commanded to record for him all the events from the creation of heaven and earth until Israel enters the covenant. Scholars commonly place the Book of Jubilees in the Second Temple period around the 2nd century BC, within a Jewish atmosphere filled with debates over the law festivals, the sacred calendar, and the identity of the covenant people. Many academic sources today date the composition of Jubilees to around 160 to 150 BC. What makes Jubilees special is that it does not tell history according to ordinary years. It divides time into Jubilee cycles, each cycle consisting of 49 years, meaning 7 times 7 years. Every event is placed within a week of years within a Jubilee inside an ordered structure of time. That is why the book is also called Kufale, meaning the Book of Divisions, because it divides history into clearly marked sections. In the world of Jubilees, time is not merely for counting days and months. Time is proof that God governs history through law, covenant, and the precision of heaven. At the center of that order is the 364-day calendar. This is an extremely important point. Jubilees presents a solar calendar of exactly 364 days, equivalent to 52 complete weeks. Because 364 is divisible by 7 every year, always has the same weekly structure. The sacred festivals fall on the same day of the week every year, without drifting according to the lunar cycle. Studies of the Qumran calendar also emphasize this advantage. A 364-day year divides exactly into 52 weeks and 4 seasons, with each season having 13 weeks. For us modern people, a wall calendar is only a familiar tool for counting days. Every household has one. But for ancient people, the calendar system was a matter of survival. Imagine this domino chain. If your calendar is wrong, your Sabbath day will be wrong. If the Sabbath is wrong, major sacred feasts such as Passover, the Feast of Weeks, or the Day of Atonement will fall completely out of rhythm. And what is the final consequence? Your entire community is praying and worshiping at the wrong time before God. Therefore, which calendar to use was not a quarrel among scientists or astronomers. It was a life and death battle over the control of worship. The Book of Jubilees directly attacked the calendar system based on the moon. It warned forcefully that those who calculate days and months by observing the moon would disrupt the seasons, disturb the order of years, and throw the holy days out of their proper orbit. In the world view of this book, the 364-day calendar was not invented by human beings. It is the heartbeat of heaven. It is the original order of the Creator, keeping the holy days in their proper place. Any other calendar system is a trap causing humanity to step out of the sacred rhythm established by God. And this is not only theory on paper. Archaeological evidence has supported this truth in a chilling way. When researchers excavated the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran, they discovered a shocking reality. The community of separated believers there had rejected the calendar system being used by the elites in Jerusalem. The decoded texts, especially the cryptic scroll known as 4Q324D, clearly prove that the Qumran community held tightly to this perfect 364-day calendar to organize all seasons and festivals. They would rather withdraw into the dry desert and live apart from the world than worship God at the wrong time, because of a calendar manipulated by human beings. That is why the return of Jubilees through the Dead Sea Scrolls changed the entire place of this book in modern scholarship. Before Qumran Jubilees was known mainly through the Ethiopic version, a few Latin fragments, and ancient quotations. But at Qumran, fragments of Jubilees appeared in multiple copies, especially in Cave 4. The Israel Antiquities Authority preserves manuscripts such as 4Q216, 4Q Jubilees, showing that Jubilees was not a late Ethiopian text, but had circulated in the ancient Jewish environment before and around the time of Jesus. And this is the moment when truth exploded in modern history. For centuries, the Western elites looked down on Ethiopia's Ge'ez manuscripts, treating them as excessive marginal texts. Until one day, archaeologists dug up Hebrew parchment scrolls hidden inside the caves of Qumran in the Judean desert. Guess what happened? Their content matched what Ethiopia had been preserving. A text brutally discarded by the West was now proven to have been vital for Jews in the Second Temple period. This throws a cold question straight into our faces. If the Book of Jubilees was once respected, copied, and carefully protected at Qumran, why did it vanish from your Bible? The answer does not lie in faith, it lies in power. When Rabbinic Judaism reshaped its doctrinal system, it decided to set the book aside. After that, Western Christianity and most of Eastern Christianity quickly labeled it pseudepigrapha and expelled it from the Bible. Only one place refused to bow: the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. They preserved the book, calling it Kufale, or Little Genesis. And history must admit this: the entire priceless book survived intact on earth because of their Ethiopic version. What does this prove? It proves that Ethiopia was not simply collecting a few extra old books. They were protecting an entirely different worldview. In that system, the angels are the ones who record time. Sacred days and months are not toys for earthly rulers to distort however they wish. Holy feasts cannot be pulled backward or pushed forward to serve political schemes. Everything from creation to the summit of Mount Sinai moves according to one precise rhythm appointed by God. And it is precisely at this point that the Book of Jubilees reveals its deadly danger. It declares forcefully that the control of sacred time belongs to the Creator, not to any Pope Emperor or religious power center. Think about it. If a community of believers holds in its hands the perfect 364-day calendar from heaven, what will they do? They will overthrow every earthly control. They will have the right to reject the calendar of the temple, the calendar of the clergy, and the calendar of the government if they discover that those calendars have been corrupted by human beings. In the past, this drew a brutal line of division. And for later Western religious elites, it directly threatened their livelihood and authority. It raised a fatal question: who truly has the right to decide which day you must worship? Therefore, the real reason this book was buried is not simply some cheap conspiracy theory, like Rome changed the calendar to manipulate believers. The deeper truth is far sharper. The Book of Jubilees protects a concept of time that is too independent, too primordial, and impossible to manipulate. Any organization, church, or institution that wants to monopolize the control of feast days, regulate seasons of worship, and seize the spiritual rhythm of the masses will see this book as a thorn in the eye that must be removed at all costs. The Book of Jubilees reminded humanity of a truth that makes power-hungry rulers tremble long before religious councils were formed, before the Roman Empire issued liturgical calendars, and before churches stretched out their tentacles to control faith. There was a perfect order of time personally handed down by God from the summit of Mount Sinai. But the Book of Jubilees hides a second secret. A secret even darker and more painful than the 364-day calendar. It is the answer to the existence of demons. Think for a moment, what was the purpose of the Great Flood? It was to cleanse the earth. So if the entire old world was submerged, why did sin continue to take root? Why were the descendants of Noah tempted almost immediately after stepping out of the ark of rescue? Why did evil spirits still lurk and harass mankind? And why did humanity quickly slide back into violence, idolatry, and division? The Book of Jubilees. Chapter 10 gives a specific and terrifying explanation that Western theology has often avoided. The book says this: the waters of the Great Flood had just receded. The world had been washed clean. Noah and his sons began rebuilding humanity, but that peace did not last. Suddenly, Noah's grandchildren began to fall sick, go mad, become blind, and slaughter one another. Noah quickly recognized a horrifying truth. The floodwaters had only drowned the gigantic bodies of the Nephilim, but their evil spirits had not died. These evil spirits had risen from the mud, becoming invisible phantoms, frantically hunting and poisoning the minds of the younger generation. Unable to stand by and watch his descendants be destroyed, Noah fell down in prayer. He pleaded urgently with God. "You showed mercy and saved me from the waters. Do not let these evil spirits destroy my children. Please bind them and cast them all into the abyss of judgment." God answered. He immediately commanded the archangels, "Bind all of them." Everything seemed to be finished. The demons were about to be completely swept from the face of the earth. But at the very moment the command was given, the space of the cosmic courtroom was interrupted. Mastema stepped forward. Mastema, the one bearing the title Chief of the Evil Spirits. The leader of the opposing side came before the throne of the Creator. He did not raise a weapon against God because he knew he had no chance. Instead, he presented a cold and brazen legal argument. He said, "Lord Creator, please leave a few of them for me. If you imprison all of them, what tools will I have to exercise my power and test mankind? For the nature of mankind is already deceitful and filled with corruption. I need them to expose that corruption." A silence fell. Mastema was openly asking God to give him weapons to set traps for humanity. And here is the shocking verdict from the throne: God agreed. But he did not hand all power to Mastema. He established an extremely harsh and precise boundary. God commanded, "Bind 90% of them and cast them straight into the dark abyss." but leave the remaining 10% free under Mastema's authority. Immediately, 9/10 of the army of evil spirits were chained and thrown into darkness. But 1/10 survived and was permitted to wander the earth until today. However, God did not abandon humanity among those wolves. The Book of Jubilees records an extremely important detail. Immediately after issuing the 90-10 verdict, God commanded an angel to approach Noah. This angel taught Noah how to use roots herbs and hidden medicines to heal every disease caused by the 10% of evil spirits that remained. Noah carefully wrote all this life-saving knowledge into a book and passed it down to his son Shem. Now connect all of this together, and you will see that this book has just completely shattered your old worldview. It proves one thing: demons do not run wild because God is powerless or asleep. Not at all. The existence of evil spirits on earth today falls within a limit strictly approved by God. Mastema is extremely dangerous. He can tempt, disturb, incite war, and destroy your life. But he is chained by a rope stretching down from heaven. He is not a God ruling alongside God. He is only a brutal instrument of sifting. That 10% of evil spirits was left behind like fire testing gold. They wander in order to expose hypocrites, to tear the masks off the weak who are easily bought, and to prove who truly holds firm in faith when pushed into a corner. This point creates a perfect and chillingly tight connection with the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch tells you the origin of demons. They are the remnants of the hybrid Nephilim race. The Book of Jubilees tells you how they operate, why they survived after the Great Flood, and exactly how the 90-10 ratio was established. And that is why Jubilees became too intense a book for Rome to keep. It is not merely a book for calculating dates and months. It is the blueprint of the entire cosmic order. Look at the structure this book draws. Above time is locked by the perfect 364-day, 52-week calendar with feasts and covenants closely supervised by angels. Below, 10% of evil spirits are allowed to roam under Mastema's authority to set traps for human beings. And you, humanity, are stuck in the middle of those two severe realities. When you understand this, you realize that time does not pass meaninglessly. Time itself is the battlefield. Every Sabbath is a test of loyalty. Every time you worship on the wrong day, you step out of the order of heaven. Every temptation Mastema throws into your life is a test of whether you will choose the rhythm of God or chase the chaos of demons. With a theological structure this detailed, this strict, and this direct, it is not hard to understand why Jubilees was pushed to the margins. The Western churches needed a canon that was lighter, softer, and most importantly, easier to control. They did not want disputes about calendars. They did not want to explain the 90% and 10% ratio of demons. They turned this book into pseudepigrapha and gradually erased it from the pulpit. But Ethiopia said, no, we will keep it all. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church preserved this full text in Ge'ez. To them, this book was so important that they called it Kufale, the Little Genesis. And once again, history proved Ethiopia right. When archaeologists found the Dead Sea Scrolls in the caves of Qumran, they uncovered fragments of the Book of Jubilees, written in ancient Hebrew, such as Fragment 4, Q216. This physical evidence poured cold water on those who had once belittled the book. It proved that Jubilees had once stood at the center of life and death debates about the law and holiness of ancient Jews, even before the time of Jesus. The banning of the Book of Jubilees was not a single overnight book-burning event. It was the result of a deliberate process of elimination designed to make Christianity more comfortable, but its message could not be extinguished. This book is still crying out a thunderous truth for our age. If the Book of Enoch warns that knowledge without morality will destroy the world, then the Book of Jubilees warns that manipulated time will cut off the link between you and the Creator. If Enoch shows how demons came into being, then Jubilees exposes how they are operating right now to test you. It strips away every illusion of safety. It forces you to ask, who decided the holy days? I am keeping. Am I living according to the heartbeat of heaven? Or am I being swept along by the schedule of the secular world? Are the temptations out there random, or are they traps already set by the 10% of evil spirits still wandering? That is the most frightening power of Jubilees, which the West tried to hide. If the Book of Enoch is the explanation for the collapse of the old world, then the Book of Jubilees is the survival manual for the new world. Keep the correct time, hold tightly to the covenant, and always stay awake, because behind the peaceful days passing across the calendar, there is an invisible war of demons waiting to devour you. And that brutal war did not begin yesterday. It broke out from the very first moment humanity was stripped of paradise. If you want to know how relentless and malicious the devil truly is, we must return to his first victims. In the familiar Western Bible, the story of Adam and Eve ends extremely quickly. They listen to the serpent's deception. They eat the forbidden fruit. They realize they are naked. They are questioned by God and receive their sentence. After that, they are driven straight out of the Garden of Eden. The gate of Eden slams shut. The flaming cherubim are stationed there to guard the way to the tree of life. End of story. From there, the book of Genesis turns to a new page, moving very quickly to the story of Cain-Abel, the line of Seth, and the world before the great flood. But there is a massive question sitting right there, hanging unresolved for thousands of years. What really happened immediately after Adam and Eve took their first steps outside Eden? How did those first two human beings manage on their first night outside the garden? What did they feel when for the first time in their lives they tasted darkness, stepped on sharp stones until they bled, felt the gnawing hunger, the burning thirst, and the utter weakness of a mortal body? How did they face the fear of wild beasts and the agony of being completely cut off from the radiant glory they once possessed? And the most chilling question of all, did Satan really let them go that easily after making them fall? Or did he continue to pursue them to the very end, hunting them from the first dark days of human history? It is precisely in this brutal gap of history where the Western Bible remains silent that Ethiopia's archive gives a ruthless answer through one book. The conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan. This is a non-canonical Christian work known in English through the translation by Solomon Caesar Malan in 1882. The title page of Malan's translation clearly states that this is the Book of Adam and Eve, also called The Conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan, a book of Eastern Christianity translated from Ethiopic with notes from Kufale the Talmud, the Midrashim, and other Eastern works. In terms of origin, this text belongs to the stream of Adamic literature, meaning works that expand the story of Adam and Eve after Genesis. It is connected to Syriac traditions, such as the Cave of Treasures, then passed through Arabic and Ethiopic environments. Many scholarly sources summarize that this work was preserved in Ge'ez, or Ethiopic, has an Arabic background, and is tied to ancient Syriac traditions about Adam, Eve, Seth, Cain, Abel, Noah, and the history of salvation. If Enoch tells of the secrets before the Great Flood, if Jubilees tells of sacred time and Mastema, then the conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan tells of the moment the first human beings had to learn how to live in a world that had lost Eden. And this is what makes the book so painful. It begins immediately after Adam and Eve are driven out of the garden. The text opens with Adam and Eve leaving Eden and going to the Cave of Treasures, the place where they were commanded to live after losing the garden. In the introduction of the Ethiopic text, the scribe says that this is the story of the conflicts that happened to Adam and Eve after they left the garden, during the time they lived in the Cave of Treasures, according to the command of God. The Cave of Treasures is a very powerful image. It is not a palace. It is not a house. It is a cave. Adam, who once lived in the light of Eden, now had to step into a place that was dark, narrow, cold, and unfamiliar. Eve, who once walked through the garden, watered by the river of life, now had to learn how to live with a body that could feel hunger, thirst, fear, and pain. The world outside Eden was not merely normal life in the modern sense. For them, it was a fall from glory into a brutal struggle for survival. In one deeply haunting passage, the text says that when Adam and Eve came out of the cave, looked toward the gate of the garden, and saw the water that had once flowed from the root of the tree of life, they burst into tears. Their pain caused them to fall into the water, and they tried to end their lives so they would no longer have to look upon creation in its state of lost glory. The book says clearly that they fell into the water because of the anguish of their weeping, and they wanted to put an end to themselves because of the sorrow they felt after leaving the garden. This is a detail Genesis does not tell, and it is precisely this detail that turns the book into humanity's first kind of psychological horror. Adam and Eve were not merely expelled from a location. They were separated from a state of existence. Before that, they lived in closeness with God, in a world of order, beauty, fruitfulness, purity, and light. After the fall, their bodies changed. Their vision became limited. They began to feel heat, thirst, hunger, fear of wild beasts, fear of darkness, and fear for the future of their own descendants. God tells Adam that because of his transgression, his bright nature was taken away, and from then on, he would only see nearby according to the ability of the flesh. That pain was so deep that God had to send his word many times to raise them up. When they were close to death in the water, he sent angels to pull them out, and the word of God brought them back to life. From there, the book pulls the reader into an extremely brutal and suffocating cycle of survival. Adam and Eve collapse in despair. Satan seizes the opportunity to attack. God intervenes to save their lives. And then those two human beings must swallow their tears and learn yet another bitter lesson about the weakness of their mortal bodies. And this is where the book raises the tension to its highest point. Satan refuses to let go of his prey. In your familiar Bible, after the serpent deceives Eve into eating the forbidden fruit, he disappears without a trace. The story moves in another direction. But in this book, Satan appears in his true nature as a frantic and relentless hunter. He understands a physical law very well. Adam and Eve are the first and only seed. If he can destroy these two people right outside the gate of Eden, the entire human race will be strangled while still in the womb. Human history will end before it has even begun. So his game is far more vicious. He is not merely interested in tempting them to commit a few small sins. He is waging a war of psychological destruction. What is his real goal? He wants to drag Adam and Eve to the lowest depth of despair. He wants to infect them with confusion, so they will doubt and resent God. He uses every method to break their will, make them stop praying, panic, leave the safe place God appointed for them, and finally, push them to the very end. Madness and suicide. But that is not the most frightening part. Satan's cruelest tactic is not baring his fangs or transforming into a bloodthirsty monster. He chooses to appear as a savior. Imagine this scene: Adam and Eve are standing in icy water, fasting and desperately begging for God's forgiveness. Suddenly, a dazzling being appears. He bears the perfect form of an angel of God. He brings news that could not sound more wonderful: God has shown mercy to you. Adam has been restored to his original light. Follow me, Eve, and you too will receive your crown of light. To make the deception more convincing, this demon even recites extremely precise details about the amount of gold, frankincense, and myrrh stored in their cave of treasures. Eve completely collapses before this temptation. She believes it is true, steps out of the water, and the process of prayer is brutally interrupted. Think deeply about this detail. It is cruel and terrifyingly relevant to our own time. Satan in this book does not appear with horns and a pitchfork. He He comes with a smile, carrying a piece of good news, using religious language, and striking directly at the human longing to be healed. He does not need to convince Eve to hate God. He only needs to show her a shortcut. She only needs to stop praying for a moment. She only needs to step slightly out of obedience. She only needs to close her eyes and chase after a gospel that sounds sacred, but is actually a deadly trap. This book exposes the brutal mechanism of temptation. When human beings are in pain, fear, and longing for salvation, they are very likely to cling to the first voice that gives them a feeling of comfort. And when psychological manipulation fails, Satan turns to physical attacks. The book describes a series of destructive traps he sets for them. He sets fire to the little food they have. He knocks over their water supply. He creates visions of walls of fire, throws massive stones, and plunges them into thick darkness just to make them believe one thing: God has abandoned them forever. The climax comes when God himself must speak to awaken Adam. I did not burn your wheat. I did not spill your water. Satan did that. Every promise of his is a deception. That is why you should not treat this as merely a religious story. This is humanity's first spiritual survival manual. Adam and Eve had to learn how to survive from zero. They had to learn how to endure tearing hunger. They had to learn how to drink water with the throat of mortals. They had to learn how to hold their breath and survive the dark night. They had to learn how to clasp their hands and pray as sinners. And the most costly survival lesson of all, they had to learn how to distinguish the voice of God from the whisper of the devil. But in the middle of that brutal battlefield, the book does not leave us in despair. It releases a theological turning point with enormous force. When Adam and Eve were trembling outside Eden, longing to find the water of life again, God gave a promise that crossed space and time. He told Adam that the water of life would not be given to him that day. It would be given on the day when the Word of God descended into the world and shed his precious blood at Golgotha, the very place where Adam's skull would later be buried. And that sacred blood would become the true water of life, washing Adam and all his righteous descendants clean. This connection is explosive. The book affirms a shocking truth. The plan of salvation did not begin in the stable at Bethlehem. It was already set in motion at the very moment Adam and Eve stood trembling, covered in mud and sin, outside the gate of Eden. And God promised that he himself would step down into this darkened world, shed his blood, and bring them home. So why was a book this essential for survival pushed outside the Western Bible? In reality, the conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan was not destroyed by Rome through some dramatic decree of book burning. This book emerged later as an interpretive and expanded telling of the Genesis story. Because it did not belong to the original apostolic sources, Rome viewed it with extreme caution and placed it among the marginal texts, the Apocrypha. But do not think that this means it was not forbidden in a broader sense. Very early on, church leaders showed discomfort toward books that went deeply into the biographies of Adam, Enoch, or Moses. These texts expanded the biblical universe too deeply, too vividly, and especially too realistically. And that is the true danger of this book. It stripped bare the concept of original sin. In the Western Church, regional sin is often taught as a dry theological formula. Adam ate the forbidden fruit, and mankind was cursed. But this book slaps the reader in the face. With a bloody reality, sin is not merely the breaking of a rule. Sin destroys the human ability to live in peace. The book shows you Adam and Eve crying out in madness. It shows them throwing themselves into water to commit suicide because they can no longer endure hunger, darkness, and despair. It shows their bodies once clothed in glory, growing weak, their minds panicking, and the familiar world suddenly turning into a strange trap. It pulls sin down from the pulpit to the ground, turning it into a painful struggle for physical and psychological survival. And through that lens, the image of Eve appears completely different from what you may have known. For centuries, the West has pointed straight at Eve, placing all guilt on her head as the first sinner. But this book returns to her a more human dimension. Eve is not a machine made to commit error. She is a trembling, frightened woman, targeted by Satan and deceived with the most sacred-sounding words. Yet, after everything, she continues to live. She continues to wipe away her tears, continues to pray, and walks alongside Adam through this harsh world. She is the first mother of humanity forced to learn how to survive after losing paradise. And the book also gives an enormous message of comfort. God never abandoned them to Satan. Satan did not patiently wait until empires formed or until Cain killed Abel. He attacked Adam and Eve right at the gate of Eden. He wanted to crush the first seed. But God was there. Every time they collapsed in despair and wanted to end their lives, He raised them up. Every time Satan disguised himself as radiant light to deceive them, He tore that mask apart. Every time they groaned with thirst inside the dark cave, He repeated the promise of Christ's saving blood at Golgotha. That is why Ethiopia firmly preserved this book in Ge'ez for centuries. While the West was content to slam the gate of Eden shut and quickly turn to another chapter, Ethiopia wanted to know what happened on each day afterward. And when this book was translated into English at the end of the 19th century, the modern world was stunned by its power. Because the story of Adam and Eve is also your story. Anyone who has ever lost something sacred in life understands the trembling feeling outside the gate of Eden. Anyone who has ever made a terrible mistake understands the desire to sink into the water and end everything. Anyone who has ever been deceived understands this. The devil rarely appears with a hideous face. He usually begins with a smile, an opportunity that seems too perfect, and a promise that comes exactly when you are weakest. This forbidden book does not only ask how Adam and Eve survived the first dark night. It is asking you, when you lose your garden of peace, when the familiar light suddenly goes out, and when Satan approaches in the shape of a beautiful promise, which voice will you follow? Will you choose to listen to the invitation of demons, or will you remain steadfast and trust in the Lord? Comment your choice below the video. Turn back to the familiar Bible that the Western elites handed you. When these sacred stories had to pass through the filter of Roman empires, through the editorial hands of all male clerical councils for thousands of years, the image of women was tragically domesticated. They were trimmed down until they became faint. They were turned into obedient, submissive secondary characters who only knew how to stand quietly behind men and wait in silence for salvation. The West carefully designed an extremely tight system of power where men ruled male clergy, held the privilege of communicating with God, and women were only allowed to sit in the back row and obey. But that is a blatant cutting down of history. When you step outside that doctrinal cage and open the ancient Ge'ez parchment scrolls that Ethiopia protected with its life, an entirely different reality strikes you directly in the face. The original picture of Christianity was not weak or submissive like that at all. In these texts, spiritual authority is not monopolized by men or locked inside splendid church buildings. The visions of God are not divided by gender, and His kingdom is not located on earthly thrones. It is inside the chest of every individual. There the Virgin Mary appears as one honored in an extremely high position, almost the emotional center of Ethiopian liturgical life. Holy women appear as people of prayer, endurance, wisdom, courage, and leadership in moments of crisis. And no text reveals this radiant inner authority while directly threatening the male clerical system more clearly than a book hated and erased by Rome. The Shepherd of Hermas. First, let us look at the Virgin Mary in the Ethiopian tradition. In much of modern Western Christianity, The image of the Virgin Mary has been framed in a very safe way. When people mention her, they often remember only a few still images. A humble virgin in Nazareth, a mother weeping at the foot of the cross, or a beautiful marble statue symbolizing gentleness and submission. She is often pushed into the background of history. But when you step into the Horn of Africa, everything is turned upside down. In the Ethiopian tradition, Mary's power and presence are far more intense, alive, and central. They call her by a title full of authority, Kedist Mariam, the Holy Mother. She is not a statue to be admired. She is the beating heart of the entire system of liturgy hymns, sacred icons, and the harshest fasts passed down from generation to generation. The clearest evidence of this power lies in Filseta, the great fast honoring the departure and heavenly assumption of Mary. According to Mahibere Kidusan, the official Sunday school education body of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, Filseta is not a vague memorial event. It is one of the 7 strictest fasts required by this church, lasting for 15 consecutive days from the 1st to the 15th of Nahesi. According to the Ethiopian calendar, which is roughly from the 7th to the 22nd of August, Ethiopian tradition records an extremely striking sequence of events. After Mary died, her body was not buried in silence. Angels personally descended to bring that body to paradise. And what did the apostles, the strongest men of the early church, do? They did not merely mourn. They all fasted, abstained, and prayed day and night just to receive the privilege of witnessing this great mystery. And in the end, Mary was raised and taken up in radiant glory before their eyes. This detail completely breaks the Western view. In Ethiopian spiritual life, Mary has never been a decorative memory or a faint figure standing in the nativity cave. She is the center of gravity. Her presence has the power to gather all the apostles together. The leaders of the early church had to kneel fast for her and pray to see what God had done for her. But the drama does not stop there. If you want to see Mary's true power, you must open the Liber Requiae, the Book of Mary's Repose, belonging to the Ethiopic literary tradition. This book reveals an event Rome never wanted you to read. Before she died, Mary did not lie there passively waiting. An angel descended and placed directly into her hands a secret book containing revelations from heaven. The angel commanded Mary, "Take this book and give it to the apostles so that they must open it with their own hands and read it aloud before you when the hour of departure comes." At this point, you need to understand one theological truth clearly. Although the Liber Requiae belongs to the stream of apocryphal literature outside the official canon, like the books of Matthew or John, its cultural and intellectual weight in Ethiopia is enormous. It completely removes the image of a passive woman who only obeys arrangements made by men. In the imagination and faith of Ethiopia, Mary appears as the one who holds revelation. She is the one who carries the book from heaven. She is the one who directly instructs awakens prayer and draws all the apostles, those great men, into the deepest mystery of God. From the Virgin Mary, carrying the book of Revelation, the Ethiopian archive brings us to another woman. This time, the central figure does not hold a book. She holds a sword. Welcome to the story of Judith. Look at the way religious systems have treated this book, and you will immediately see the distinction. In most modern Western Protestant Bibles, Judith is expelled beyond the boundary labeled Apocrypha and not recognized as a central part of the Word of God. But in Ethiopia, this book sits firmly in the 18th position in their Old Testament. A female warrior rejected by the West is honored by Africa as a pillar of sacred scripture. This difference is not accidental. The content of the Book of Judith is truly like a blockbuster film script, powerful enough to shatter every stereotype about female weakness and passivity. The setting of the story is extremely suffocating. The people of Israel are pushed into a corner. General Holofernes, a brutal war machine of a foreign empire, is besieging the city of Bethulia with a vast army armed to the teeth. The city's water supply has been cut off. The people are exhausted from thirst. The male leaders begin to panic, tremble, and consider surrendering the city. Right at that life and death moment, when the men have given up, Judith steps forward. She is a young widow living a highly disciplined life of fasting, prayer, and absolute faithfulness to God. But Judith does not kneel in a corner and weep while waiting for a miracle. She acts. She removes her mourning clothes, puts on her most splendid garments, adorns herself beautifully, and confidently walks straight out through the city gate. No army escorts her. There is only her and her maidservant walking directly into the tiger's den. Judith uses sharp intelligence and frightening calm to pass through the guards and gain direct access to General Holofernes. Blinded by her beauty, intelligence, and skill in communication, Holofernes loses all caution. And then in the darkness of night, when this tyrant is so drunk that he has fallen unconscious, Judith does something that shakes history. She draws Holofernes' own sword and cuts off his head. She places the bleeding head of the foreign general into a bag, calmly walks through the enemy camp, and returns to Bethulia. The next morning, when the enemy army sees the head of its commander hanging from the city wall, that entire massive force panics and collapses completely. Studies, including those from CBE International, have emphasized that the Book of Judith is a direct slap against the stereotype of the weak woman. It portrays her as a true warrior, used by God, a woman who is pure, yet sharp-edged and courageous. The most valuable point in this story is this: Judith fights through the perfect combination of absolute faith and a cold mind. She has no throne. She holds no military command. She has no official office among the clergy. Her weapons are the fear of God, an excellent ability to read the enemy's psychology, and a cold courage that dares to walk straight into the place all the men fear. In an ancient world where war epics usually carved only the names of kings, generals, and male armies into memory, the Book of Judith appears like a sacred act of resistance. God can completely reverse the battle and save an entire people through one woman who knows how to pray and dares to act. To put it plainly, that is exactly why later Western religious leaders found Judith so irritating. They could not tolerate the idea of a woman who was too intelligent, independent, and capable of holding a sword with her own hands to change the course of history, sitting prominently inside the Bible. The power system of that time only wanted women to be obedient, submissive, and standing behind men. But Ethiopia ignored that rule. They swept aside Western censorship and firmly preserved the book. They protected to the end the image of a sharp-edged woman, ready to end the enemy with her own hand and turn the situation upside down. This is where our story reaches the deepest level of spiritual resistance. If Judith reveals the power of women in action, another book strikes directly at the heart of the entire church system. A book that says, the truth of God is not in the hands of the clergy, it is in your conscience. That book is the Shepherd of Hermas. This book appeared in the 2nd century during a time when early Christianity was facing a serious crisis. If a person had been baptized but later fell into terrible sins, was there still any chance for that person to return to God? At that time, some extreme sects said, number one fall means the soul is lost forever. But Hermas, a man who had once been a slave, later rose to become a wealthy merchant, then lost all his possessions and sank into sin, received shocking visions. And his first vision did not appear in the form of a majestic deity or a pope sitting on a throne. That vision appeared in the form of a woman representing the church. At first, Hermas saw her as an old woman, wrinkled, sickly, and almost ruined. Why? Because the sins of the believers beneath her had drained her vitality. But when the call to repentance was given, and her children began to repent and amend their lives, a miracle took place. The image of that woman began to grow young again. Each wrinkle disappeared, vitality returned, and finally she appeared radiant and perfectly beautiful, like a bride on her wedding day. This image is a direct slap against every religious power system of the time. It declares forcefully that the true Church of God is not a collection of massive marble buildings. It is not a political machine with popes' decrees descending from above or coffers filled with gold and silver. The Church is a spiritual mother, wounded by the sins of her children, and she can only be made young again through the sincere repentance of each individual. Hermas gives one of the fiercest parables in religious history, the parable of the tower. He sees a massive tower being built upon the waters. That tower is the kingdom of God, and each stone used to build it is a human soul. There are square, perfect stones placed neatly into the wall. These are the pure. But there are cracked, rotten, or misshapen stones thrown out without hesitation. These are the hypocrites, the souls not yet cut and shaped by repentance. But the message of Hermas is a form of salvation that is severe yet full of hope. Those rejected stones can still be picked up again, recut through the pain of true repentance, and fitted back into the work of God. And do you understand now why this book was pushed by Rome out of the center of the Western Bible? It completely breaks the monopoly theory of forgiveness. The religious power of empires has always wanted to manage salvation. They want to hold the authority to decide who is allowed in, who is cast out, who must pay for absolution, and who must perform complicated cleansing rituals. But Hermas stands up and says, no. Forgiveness is not a cheap ticket for you to turn into a business. The book places responsibility directly into the hands of the reader. Whether you are saved depends entirely on the process of repentance inside your own inner life, in the real change of your lifestyle in your family, in the way you spend money, in how you treat the poor, and in how you master your own desires. No one can hide behind church officials. No one can buy salvation. No one can conceal a cracked, rotten soul and think he can secretly slip into the tower of God. That is the inner kingdom. Every power system fears a kingdom that begins deep in the conscience, grows through repentance, and cannot be controlled or blockaded by any earthly hand. Look again at the complete picture the Ethiopian archive has brought us. They preserve the image of the Virgin Mary, holding the secret book, commanding an entire group of male apostles to pray. They preserve the image of the widow Judith holding a sword with her own hand and ending the enemy. And they preserve the Book of Hermas, with its vision of the female figure of the church, who can only be revived through the human conscience. We see a red thread running through all of it. God never builds his kingdom on empty thrones or male power. He acts through the smallest people, those pushed to the margins by society, and souls willing to endure pain in order to be carved anew from the beginning. When the West tried to lock the Bible tightly for easier control, Ethiopia opened it wide. This African land did not merely protect ancient parchment scrolls. They protected the original soul of faith, that true power does not lie in the palaces of Rome. It lies inside your own heart. But do not think Ethiopia only protected spiritual ideas or old pages. Books like Enoch Jubilees or Hermas, no matter how powerful they may be, are still only words written on goat skin. The truth is, this African kingdom also preserved something far more terrifying than that. Something that is not a theory. A physical object carrying the most sacred and destructive power of the Creator. Something the entire Western world turned the earth upside down to find, only to helplessly declare that it had been lost forever. It is the Ark of the Covenant, the golden chest that held the 2 stone tablets of the true 10 Commandments of God. Western history has always told you that this ark vanished without a trace when the Babylonians flattened Jerusalem. Archaeologists, scholars, explorers, and even Western popular culture have turned the ark into a symbol of a lost treasure. But for Ethiopia, the story goes in a completely different direction. In their sacred memory, the Ark of the Covenant was taken out of Jerusalem and brought to Aksum, the ancient heart of the Ethiopian kingdom. And the national treasure of Ethiopia that reveals this truth is called the Kebra Nagast, the glory of the kings. To be honest, This book did not simply fall from the sky. Let us return to the context of the 14th century. At that time, Ethiopia's new dynasty, the Solomonic dynasty, had just overthrown the old government. To sit on the throne with legitimacy, they needed a reason strong enough, sacred enough to convince the people. And so, the Kebra Nagast appeared. This book released a shocking royal biography. The kings of Ethiopia were not ordinary usurpers. They carried sacred blood. They were direct descendants of the great King Solomon of Israel and the Queen of Sheba. This turned the Kebra Nagast into an extremely sharp political and theological weapon. It declared outright that Ethiopia was not merely some distant African kingdom on the map. Spiritually, this land was the new Zion, the place to which God's covenant had been transferred. The glory of Israel had officially left Jerusalem and moved straight to the south. Everything begins with the Queen of Sheba, the woman Ethiopians respectfully call Makeda. After hearing that King Solomon was the wisest and wealthiest man in the world, she decided to cross the harsh desert and travel all the way to Jerusalem. If you open the Western Bible, this meeting is told very briefly. She comes to ask him a few difficult questions, marvels at his palace, eats a banquet, and then returns home. But in the Ethiopian version, it is a majestic epic. Makeda comes there in search of wisdom, and she is completely convinced. Solomon teaches her about the true God, causing her to awaken and cast aside all false idols. A diplomatic visit becomes a spiritual revolution. And here is the detail that makes Western history heat up. Solomon and Makeda had a son together. The child was named Menelik, meaning son of the wise man. When Menelik grew up, this young man returned to Jerusalem to meet his father. Solomon immediately recognized his own blood. He loved Menelik deeply, even wanting to keep him there and hand him the throne of Israel. But Menelik shook his head. He chose to return to his mother's homeland, Ethiopia. However, when he left, Menelik did not only carry royal Israelite blood in his veins. He also decided to carry something else, something that would forever change the course of world history. According to the Kebra Nagast, when Menelik left Jerusalem, the firstborn sons of Israel's noble families were sent with him. Among them was Azariah, the son of Zadok the priest. It was this group that secretly took the Ark of the Covenant out of the temple and placed it on the journey to Ethiopia. Some versions emphasize that the Ark was taken by divine permission because God had chosen to transfer the glory of Zion to Ethiopia. When Solomon later discovered what had happened, he was devastated and sent soldiers in pursuit. But the power of the Ark caused Menelik's group to move swiftly, as if lifted by the wind of heaven. They crossed lands carrying the sign of the covenant and finally arrived in Aksum. This is the point where the Kebra Nagast turns Ethiopia into a sacred center. If the Ark of the Covenant truly left Jerusalem for Aksum, that means the most powerful symbol of God's presence was transferred from Israel to Ethiopia. For Ethiopians, this is not merely a story about an ancient object. This is the foundation of national identity. It explains why Ethiopia sees itself as a chosen people in a special sense. It explains why the Solomonic kingship was seen as an extension of David and Solomon. It explains why Aksum is not merely an ancient city, but a second Zion in Ethiopia's sacred memory. To this day, Ethiopian tradition believes that the Ark of the Covenant is preserved at the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Aksum, northern Ethiopia. This church belongs to the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church and is considered one of the holiest places in the country. Sources describe the Church of Mary of Zion as the place claimed to contain the Ark of the Covenant, with a tradition connected to Menelik I after his return from Jerusalem. The part that makes the outside world even more curious is the rule of guardianship. According to local tradition, only one monk is appointed as the guardian of the Ark. He lives near or within the chapel area, praying, offering incense, and protecting the sacred object for life. The keeper of the Ark is usually chosen until death, and then a successor is appointed. Sources summarizing the Church of Mary of Zion state that today, Only the monk who guards the ark is allowed to see it, while this restricted access continues to make both Ethiopians and foreign scholars debate the authenticity of the tradition. For Ethiopian faith, the ark's presence in Aksum is a sacred reality. For scholars, no public verification has yet been carried out under conditions sufficient to confirm that the sacred object is the Ark of the Covenant from the time of Moses. Some scholars have expressed skepticism. Edward Ullendorf, an Ethiopian studies scholar, once said that he saw the object kept at the church in 1941 and believed it was a medieval structure. That view continues to be debated because access to the object remains strictly limited. It is precisely this tension that makes the story so captivating. For the West, the lack of public evidence makes the Ethiopian Ark an unresolved question. For Ethiopians, the fact that the outside world has not seen the Ark does not weaken the tradition. On the contrary, its hiddenness increases its sacredness. Sacred objects in the Bible were never meant to be exposed to every curious eye. The Ark of the Covenant in the Torah was once surrounded by limits, ritual priesthood, and holy fear. Therefore, in the Ethiopian view, the presence of a single guardian watching over the Ark in Aksum is not merely an act of concealment. It is the continuation of reverence before a sacred object. So why was the Kebra Nagast treated with such suspicion and exclusion by the West? First, it appeared much later than the official biblical books. The existing Ge'ez form belongs to the 14th century, while the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament had gone through their canonical formation long before that. Therefore, the West placed it in the category of national epic political mythology, apocryphal literature, or Ethiopian religious literature, rather than authoritative sacred scripture like the Torah or the Gospel. Encyclopedia Britannica places the Kebra Nagast within the framework of Ethiopian literature, written during the period from 1314 to 1322, recounting Menelik and the origin of Ethiopian kingship. The second reason lies in its political function. The Kebra Nagast gives the Solomonic dynasty a sacred genealogy that connects directly to Solomon and David. For modern scholars, this gives the text the color of legitimizing royal power. Some studies describe the Kebra Nagast as a work that created the moral foundation and political myth for the Solomonic dynasty after Yekuno Amlak seized power in 1270. The third reason lies in its extremely strong claim about the Ark of the Covenant. If the Kebra Nagast is true according to Ethiopian faith, Jerusalem lost the central sacred object, while Ethiopia became the guardian of the covenant. This is a claim powerful enough to reverse the sacred map of Judaism, Western Christianity, and familiar biblical history. It says that an African kingdom, not Rome, Constantinople, or any European center, is holding the greatest physical symbol of God's presence in the Old Testament. It should be noted the Kebra Nagast was not ordered banned by the Vatican, nor burned in a public square by any official decree. The Western elites simply refused to recognize its authority. They classified it as African mythological literature because it appeared late and contained claims about the Ark of the Covenant that seemed too extraordinary. But while the West smirked and dismissed it as peripheral legend for Ethiopia, this book became the backbone of an entire nation. It was ironclad proof connecting God, King Solomon, the Queen of Sheba, and the Ethiopian throne into one inseparable whole. For centuries, this book was carefully protected in Ge'ez, the sacred language of Ethiopia. It sank deep into their blood, their art, and their political life. Not until the early 20th century did the Western world truly come to know the full story through the English translation by the scholar E. A. Wallace Budge. Immediately, it caused a shock. African-rooted movements and the Rastafari religion used it as living evidence that African Christianity had existed since ancient times, completely independent and royal in blood, without waiting for Europeans to arrive by ship and preach. But the true value of the Kebra Nagast is far greater than an Indiana Jones-style search for an artifact. It throws a theological bomb straight into the face of Western history. Think about it. Rome has always beaten its chest as the center of Christianity. Constantinople called itself the sacred imperial capital. Jerusalem is the central city of King David. But the Kebra Nagast declares forcefully, Ethiopia is the place God chose to set his glory. And they do not need the West to authorize that. They do not need any European empire to grant them honor. They have a royal biography that connects directly to Solomon and the Ark of the Covenant. That is why this book has such terrifying liberating power for Ethiopians. It shatters the arrogant prejudice of Western history, the idea that religious centers always lie in Europe or the Middle East, while Africa is only a lowland standing at the margins. Ethiopia is telling the world an entirely different history. Africa does not stand outside the Bible. Africa enters the Bible with dignity through the Queen of Sheba. Africa receives the covenant directly through Prince Menelik. Africa holds the supreme sacred object in the city of Aksum. Africa carves mountains of stone with its own hands to build the great churches of Lalibela. And Africa is the place that protects the true Bible, preserving the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees intact when the entire West discarded them. That is the core power of the Kebra Nagast. It redraws the entire sacred map of humanity. On that new map, the blood of King David flows through the veins of the Ethiopian kings. And the Ark of the Covenant, the supreme physical symbol of the presence of God, rests in the Horn of Africa. And to this very moment, that story is still unfolding in real life. Right now, outside the Church of St. Mary of Zion in Aksum, under the blazing sun, visitors still stand there looking at the ancient stele and listening to the sound of priests praying. And everyone knows that behind those sealed stone walls lies one of the boldest claims in the world. We are keeping the true Ark of the Covenant. The Western elites call it legend. Scientists call it a political tool, but Ethiopians call it the truth. If the Kebra Nagast is right, then the entire history of humanity turned in a direction the West deliberately closed its eyes to. The Ark of the Covenant never vanished into nothingness. It was brought to Aksum, protected by a resilient people through blood and prayer for thousands of years, to fulfill the mission God entrusted to them, to guard the true glory of Zion. And just when you think the Ethiopian Bible only contains mysteries about fallen angels or powerful sacred objects, this archive opens one of the darkest and bloodiest chapters of faith. That is when we must speak about the Three Books of Meqabyan, the manifestos of a faith that cannot be broken. Among the dozens of books that make the Ethiopian Bible different, the Three Books of Meqabyan hold an extremely special place. Their name is often translated by Western scholars into English as the Ethiopian Maccabees or the Ethiopic Maccabees. That very name has created a historical deception. Many Westerners, when they hear it, immediately shrug and think, oh, so it is just another version of the first and second books of Maccabees in the Catholic or Orthodox Bible. But if you understand it that way, you have already gone in the wrong direction from the start. The familiar books of Maccabees, known in the West, tell of the armed Jewish revolt against the Seleucid Empire, centered on the Hasmonean family, the cleansing of the temple, and the war to reclaim the right of worship in Jerusalem. It is a historical and political story, but the Three Books of Meqabyan in Ethiopia, they move along an entirely different path with a different voice and with a far sharper theological focus. Scholars have had to acknowledge that these three books belong inside the Old Testament of Ethiopia, were originally written in Ge'ez, and are completely different in content from the Western books of Maccabees. This is the first point you must engrave deeply in your mind. Meqabyan is not a copy of the West. Meqabyan is a distinct and independent Ethiopian tradition about absolute faithfulness, bloody martyrdom, and the utter meaninglessness of earthly power when it stands before the Creator. In the official list of 81 books of the Ethiopian Church, with 46 books of the Old Testament and 35 books of the New Testament. These three books sit prominently in the 20th and 21st positions of the Old Testament. The similarity in naming caused the Western elites to pass over them, and as for their origin, it remains a mist-covered region. No one knows exactly when they were born. Modern scholarship has neglected these three books, unlike the intense attention given to Enoch or Jubilees. Some have guessed that they appeared during the Middle Ages, when Christian life in Ethiopia was entering one of its most radiant eras. But that mystery only makes Meqabyan even more chillingly fascinating. It is not a global blockbuster. It has no archaeological fragments hidden in the caves of Qumran. Meqabyan exists quietly and deeply inside the Ethiopian world, preserved within Gehez texts, living in liturgical worship, and carved into the martyr memory of the people there. It is like a locked room inside the Ethiopian Bible. Very few Westerners have ever stepped inside yet. Within it lies a fierce epic about human beings who refuse to bow. Open the first book, First Meqabyan. The story immediately strikes the reader with the image of Tserutzaidan, a mad tyrant king. He is sunk in sin, arrogant in his military strength, and believes that false gods have given him the throne. The text describes a rotten political machine. Countless priests serve the false gods day and night, offering impure sacrifices. He has 50 male statues and 20 female statues cast covered with gold and silver, builds private temples, and forces the entire population to eat from the sacrificial tables of those false gods. What do you see here? This is a world where politics and demons merge into one. Tserutzaidan does not rule only by sword and spear. He uses religion to brainwash. He turns idol worship into state law, turns a meal into an impure ritual, and uses submission to false gods as the only measurement of political loyalty. The rule is simple: bow before the golden statue and live. Refuse, and you become an enemy of the nation. Then the bloodiest decree is issued. Soldiers pour across the kingdom. They kick down doors from house to house, hunting those who refuse to bow. Anyone who resists is slaughtered by sword, spear, and burning pyres. Property is looted, homes are flattened. The book exposes the brutal mechanism of dictatorship. Belief is forced by soldiers, idols are protected by blades, and false worship becomes the supreme tool for controlling the masses. Right in the middle of that earthly hell, a man named Maccabeus appears. He belongs to the territory of Benjamin and has 3 sons, Abijah, Shelah, and Pantera, or Abia, Sela, and Phentos in some translations. They are not weak men. They are strong, handsome, and extremely courageous young men. But the strongest weapon they possess is not muscle. It is iron faith. When the soldiers point swords at their necks and ask why they dare to be so insolent and refuse to worship the idols, the 3 brothers look straight into their eyes and answer, "We worship only the true Creator, the one who made the heavens and the earth, the moon, the sun, the sea, and the stars." And this is the heartbeat of the entire Book of Meqabyan. The real war does not happen on a battlefield with tens of thousands of soldiers. The real war begins with one ruthless question: before whom will man kneel? While the Western Maccabees revolve around raising swords and killing to liberate territory, Meqabyan pushes the reader into the battlefield of conscience. An old father and 3 unarmed sons stand before a tyrant king. In front of them are hungry beasts, blood-soaked whips, a blazing furnace, and a death sentence. But deep within their chests is something the king's throne can never steal: absolute loyalty to God. King Tserutzaidan goes mad. He orders them beaten, bound tightly, and imprisoned in a dark dungeon for 3 days and 3 nights. But when they are dragged before the king again, their answer remains sharp as a razor. They would rather die than offer sacrifices, and they will never bow before piles of gold, silver, wood, and stone, lifeless matter without soul. things that cannot even save themselves, so how could they save anyone else? This passage is a sledgehammer blow against the foundation of every earthly idol. A statue can be covered with tons of gold. A throne can force an entire nation into silence. A temple can be splendid and luxurious. But if it is only an object shaped by human hands, if it needs human beings to dust it, protect it, and invent miracles for it, then it has no right to demand the soul of a human being. Sarut-Sadon's rage reaches its peak. He roars and orders them whipped, beaten with iron rods, and their flesh torn apart until their internal organs spill out. He uses the most brutal tortures to intimidate them, but it is useless. They have placed their lives on the scale and used their own blood to prove one truth. There are boundaries human beings must never compromise. The climax of martyrdom begins. He orders soldiers to rub salt into their open wounds, then burn their flesh with torches. When he sees that they still do not groan in surrender, he releases hungry bears, tigers, and lions to tear them apart. But a chilling miracle happens when the wild beasts charge forward. They suddenly stop. They bow down before the martyrs, then turn around and roar, throwing the king's army into chaos. This image carries terrifying theological power. Wild nature still recognizes the righteous, while the one who bears the title of king is completely blind. Beasts know how to bow before holiness, while a tyrant forces human beings to kneel before wood and stone. Meqabyan overturns the whole world. The one sitting on the throne behaves like a bloodthirsty beast, while the wild beasts become witnesses defending justice. Unable to keep his composure, the king orders a massive pit of fire to be dug. Pitch, sulfur, and flammable substances are poured in so the flames will rage as fiercely as possible. The martyrs are thrown straight into the furnace, but at that very moment, they calmly entrust their souls to God. Everyone who witnesses it sees angels descending gently, lifting their souls and carrying them to the eternal garden where the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are waiting to welcome them. Meqabyan is not a cheap book about violence. It is a vision of the immortality of the soul. Flesh can be roasted, blood can dye the earth red, fire can burn the body. But a tyrant can only decide how a person dies. Only God decides where that soul will go. The arrogance of the king is completely crushed in the final detail. He wants to burn their bodies to ashes to erase every trace. But the fire refuses to consume their bodies. He orders boulders and iron millstones tied to their corpses and has them thrown into the depths of the sea. But the Spirit of God raises them up. The water cannot swallow them. Birds and wild animals dare not touch them. Giant birds spread their wings to shade their bodies from the scorching sun. Their corpses shine with radiant glory, surrounded by the light of angels. That is the ultimate language of martyrdom in Ethiopian Christianity. The dictator naively thinks that killing people ends the story. But Meqabyan declares even the lifeless body of the righteous is a sentence of judgment. Fire, the deep sea wild beasts, and the sun all rise as witnesses against brutality. All creation chooses to stand with those who hold firm in faith. The second book, Second Meqabyan, opens another path. It tells of a man named Maccabeus, but ironically, at first, he is the one who takes up the sword against Israel. However, after being taught by the prophet Ray, he awakens. He repents of his sins and breaks with his own hands the idols he once worshipped. Later, his descendants are the very ones who must rise up against the tyrant Sarut-Sadon, ready to sacrifice themselves to protect the faith. This detail is extremely valuable. Meqabyan does not paint people as saints from birth. It shows you the truth. A person may once have stood on the wrong side, may once have sunk into the sin of false gods, but can still turn back, smash deception, and become the banner of faith. The book does not only speak about death, it speaks about return. No matter what your past has been, you can still become a great witness. The third book. Third Meqabyan, though only 10 chapters long, is a razor-sharp warning. It focuses on salvation, punishment, and the vital importance of faith through examples from Adam, Job, and King David. It exposes the mechanism of the devil's deception. The book clearly states that the devil was once a powerful angel, but was cast out of heaven by God because of pride, because he dared to refuse to bow before Adam. When the three books are placed together, Meqabyan builds an unmistakable worldview. Idols are blatant deception. Tyrants use false religion to control the mind. The righteous must cling to faith until their final breath. The body can be crushed, but resurrection belongs to the supreme authority of God. Earthly power is only a fleeting illusion. The devil pulls the strings behind pride, and the final judgment of the Creator will clearly separate the faithful from the rebellious. So the greatest question arises: why was such a masterpiece forbidden in the West? To be fair, Rome never issued a law to erase Meqabyan from the Western Bible. It simply never entered it in the first place. These books were born and nourished entirely in Ge'ez within Ethiopia. They existed outside the reach of Hebrew, Greek, and Latin translation traditions. Therefore, the word forbidden here carries a more bitter meaning. It was deliberately ignored and pushed aside by the West. It was confused with the Greek books of Maccabees. It was thrown into a hidden corner of popular scholarship, treated as a strange African appendix, instead of being respected as a backbone of the Ethiopian Bible. The first and clearest reason is the language barrier. When the West shaped the Bible through the three languages of Hebrew, Greek, and Latin, Ge'ez texts were immediately pushed to the margins. It took a very long time before the first English translations appeared, allowing international readers to know that this book truly existed. The second reason is a deadly misunderstanding. The very name Ethiopian Maccabees caused the West to assume that this was merely another handwritten variant of the Hasmonean family story. They refused to understand that Meqabyan is an entirely different monument. Here, the name Maccabeus has moved beyond the boundary of one family and become an immortal symbol of resistance, opposition to idol worship, and confrontation with tyranny. But the deepest and most essential reason the West found Meqabyan so hard to tolerate is its brutally direct content. This book is a fiery slap against every political system that relies on state-sponsored idols. It unmasks kings who use armies to force the people to kneel. It pushes the believer into a ruthless life-and-death choice: bow in compromise to save your life, or stand tall and walk into the furnace to keep your soul. You cannot use any elegant words to soften this message. Meqabyan declares bluntly, loyalty to the Creator always stands higher than every law of the king, higher than personal safety, and higher even than your own life. That is the kind of text that makes every ruling system tremble. A community that reads Meqabyan will realize no law has the right to force worship. A father who reads Meqabyan will understand his highest responsibility to teach his children to hold firm in faith, even when the whole world is going mad. A young man who reads Meqabyan will understand that dying in faithfulness is 1,000 times more glorious than surviving in cowardly betrayal. And that is exactly why Meqabyan is the most precious jewel for explaining the title, Why Was the Ethiopian Bible Forbidden? It does not lead you into boring Western-style political schemes. It throws you straight into the center of the war of conscience. On one side, the king has golden statues, an army whips a furnace, and the power to kill. On the other side, the believer has only prayer, a weak body, and the hope of resurrection. On the surface, an ant is standing against a tank. But Meqabyan declares that the true scale of the universe always rests in the palm of God's hand. Therefore, Ethiopia's successful preservation of Meqabyan is a tremendous miracle. The Ethiopian Bible does not only hold secrets about the fallen angels in Enoch, does not only protect the perfection of time and jubilees or the royal bloodline of the Ark of the Covenant in the Kebra Nagast, it also preserves an entire manual of martyrdom, where faith is roasted in the furnace and faithfulness crushes every earthly power. After centuries locked in silence, Meqabyan is finally beginning to revive in brilliance. New English translations from 2008, 2018, and 2023 are helping the modern world touch a text that was forgotten for far too long. And this return strikes brutally into the wound of today's world. We are living in an age overshadowed by new idols. Golden statues have been replaced by numbers in bank accounts. Thrones have been replaced by fame, political power, and extreme ideology. Today's false gods hide behind phone screens, seep into the media, manipulate the education system, and brainwash human beings into believing they can create truth for themselves. They are not made of wood or stone like in the days of King Serutzaidan, but they are still screaming for you to kneel and submit. Meqabyan is staring straight into your face and asking a question sharp as a blade. When that brutal moment of testing comes before, what will you bow? If the crowd mocks your faith, will you dare to speak? If speaking the truth costs you your career and livelihood, will you step back? If the price of faithfulness is being thrown into the furnace of public opinion, will you still dare to sing praise to God? Meqabyan is not a fairy tale to enjoy before sleep. It is an X-ray that sees straight through your conscience. It does not allow you to stand on the sidelines, applauding the courage of ancient people. It grabs you by the collar, drags you into the square of the tyrant. Serutzaidan points at the blazing fire pit and shouts, "Choose!" Remember the most intense climax. The martyrs stepped straight into the blazing furnace and gave their souls to God. Angels descended to bring them to heaven. Their bodies shone with glory. Every creature in the universe rose to protect them. And the tyrant, who had once fantasized that he held absolute power, finally had to tremble as he realized a terrifying truth. There are souls that no power in this world can ever buy or crush. That is the greatest secret of Meqabyan. This book never glorifies death. It glorifies a faith strong enough to trample death. It does not honor sick obsession with pain. It honors loyalty that dares to step over pain. It does not tell the story of the furnace to frighten you. It tells the story of the furnace to prove to you that a soul truly belonging to God can walk upright through hell and still keep its dignity intact. That is why the Three Books of Meqabyan are considered the most brutal and radiant part of the Ethiopian Bible. They remind us that true faith is not measured by gentle prayers inside magnificent churches. True faith is revealed only when a violent system points a gun at your head and forces you to kneel before a lie. True faith is when your body trembles, but your soul still stands completely upright. It is when an entire family looks at one another, faces death, and together declares with one voice, "We belong to the Creator, even if that furnace devours us." The West may have done everything it could to forget Meqabyan, but Ethiopia firmly preserved it. They preserved it in Giz. They engraved it into their official Bible. They passed it down in the memory of bloody martyrdom. They kept it as an eternal warning. The history of faith is not written only with black ink on parchment. It is written in the red blood of human beings who would rather die than ever bow before idols. And when these books of fire return to you in the 21st century, they carry a question that will haunt you for the rest of your life. In the age you are living in, whose face does the tyrant Serutzaidan wear? Where is the false idol being raised? And what will you do when this entire system demands that you kneel? We have spoken about fallen angels. We have spoken about demons. We have spoken about bloody martyrdom. But within the vast archive of the Ethiopian Bible, there is one book that is completely different. It is not dramatic in the way of swords or monsters. It is dramatic through the bending of space and time. That book is Fourth Baruch, also known as the Paralipomena of Jeremiah, meaning the remaining words of Jeremiah. This book throws you into one of the darkest and most desperate moments in history, the day when the great city of Jerusalem completely collapsed under the devastation of the Babylonian army. In the Bible, you usually read that event is already painful enough. The city is besieged, the temple is flattened, and the people are chained by the neck and dragged into exile. The prophet Jeremiah can only stand there and weep, but Fourth Baruch steps in and says that was not the whole truth. There were secrets left behind. This book tears that wound wide open, retelling the collapse through a tragic, mystical, and deeply surreal lens. From its very first pages, the book presents a haunting detail. Before the night the Babylonian army stormed in, God commanded Jeremiah to secretly bury all the holiest vessels and sacred garments of the temple beneath the earth. The ground opened its mouth and swallowed everything in order to hide it. This detail affirms one thing: the Babylonian army could burn the city, but it could never steal the holiness of God. After that, the story turns to a man named Abimelech, a righteous Ethiopian, who once saved the life of the prophet Jeremiah. Right before the Babylonians broke through the city gate, Jeremiah sent Abimelech out of Jerusalem to the garden of Agrippa to gather a basket of figs. Abimelech went to pick the fruit, grew tired, and sat down to rest beneath the shade of a tree. Slowly, he closed his eyes, and that sleep lasted for 66 years. When Abimelech woke up, he stretched and thought he had only dozed for a few dozen minutes. He looked down, and the basket of figs beside him was still fresh, still dripping with sweetness, as if the fruit had just been picked from the branch. But when he walked back toward Jerusalem, he froze. The glorious city he once knew was now nothing but a heap of desolate ruins. The people he had known had been taken away into exile. The entire world he remembered had been erased for more than half a century. Imagine it like a slow-motion film. Abimelech sleeps beneath the tree. Meanwhile, behind him, the camera fast-forwards through flames, filling the sky, city walls collapsing, and tens of thousands of Israelites chained by the neck and dragged along a dusty road toward Babylon. 66 years of blood and tears pass. Empires rise and decline. But under that tree, this man still sleeps peacefully, and the basket of fruit still does not rot. That is the theological heart of the book. That fresh basket of figs is not merely a strange miracle. It is a life and death message. Through that basket of figs, God is saying to the people despairing in exile, if I can preserve a basket of fruit fresh for 66 years, then I can also preserve this nation through every destruction of empire. The empire sees collapse, but God sees the day of return. Yet the mystery of Fourth Baruch does not stop with the 66 years sleep. The book continues to push the viewer into one of its most surreal, breathless, and powerfully symbolic scenes, the appearance of the eagle carrying the seed of life. Imagine the setting at that moment. Baruch is trapped among the desolate ruins of Jerusalem. Around him, there is only broken stone ash and deadly silence. Thousands of miles away beyond the harsh desert, the prophet Jeremiah and the surviving people are groaning in slavery in Babylon. Baruch longs to send a letter of peace and hope to them. But how can he cross thousands of miles filled with enemies? He kneels among the ruins and prays, and God answers in an unimaginable way. The sky suddenly darkens beneath the wingspan of a giant eagle. It lands directly before Baruch, but it does not cry out with the sound of a bird. It looks straight into his eyes and speaks in human language. I have been sent by the Most High to be your messenger. That moment feels like a scene from a science fiction film, but Baruch does not hesitate. He immediately writes a letter. And to prove to Jeremiah the miracle of God, he takes out 15 fresh figs, the very figs that had defied the laws of time, remaining intact for 66 years in Abimelech's basket. Baruch carefully ties the letter and the cluster of figs around the eagle's neck. then commands it to spread its wings and fly toward the empire of Babylon. The eagle carrying the sacred letter slices through the wind across the dry wilderness. Then along the way, it lands to rest in a desolate field. Right where it comes down, there is a dead body lying cold and exposed. And this is when the second miracle erupts. The moment the eagle carrying on its neck the promise of God and the figs of life lands, an invisible breath of life spreads out. The corpse suddenly convulses, its chest rises and draws in a deep breath, its eyes open wide, and the dead man rises back to life. Why would the book include such a shocking detail? Certainly not to frighten the audience or tell a cheap fairy tale. It is a theological message, sharp as a razor. In the thought world of Fourth Baruch, that dead body is the symbol of the nation of Israel, a people that seem to have been strangled and buried forever by Babylon. The eagle is not merely a delivery bird knocking on a door. It is the envoy of heaven, the embodiment of intervention from God. The dead body rising in the desert is like an alarm sounding across the universe. The dark exile is reaching its end. Death no longer holds dominion. God is bringing life back to the dead land, and a people once buried is about to be pulled up from the deep grave by him to stand upright and return home. By this point, after witnessing these surreal scenes, you surely understand why Rome and Western theologians pushed Fourth Baruch straight to the margins. For a doctrinal system always craving logic, order, and dry frameworks, this book looks like a blatant violation of the rules. How could they accept a man sleeping on the ground for 66 years without aging by even one wrinkle? How could they believe that a basket of figs left for decades was still dripping with sweetness? And how would they dare bring to the pulpit the story of an eagle that speaks human language, or a cold corpse suddenly coming back to life just because the shadow of a bird passed over it? They quickly labeled it apocryphal, a mass of wild folk legend, so they could easily cast it aside. But the West was wrong, deeply wrong. They looked at this book through the eyes of people sitting comfortably inside splendid palaces without feeling the bleeding heartbeat inside it. Fourth Baruch never tried to record history in the cold, lifeless manner of royal court scribes. It writes history with the tears of a conquered people. It is told in the choked voice of fathers and mothers, chained by the neck bleeding as they stumble through the dark night of exile. At the very bottom of despair, when the swords of the enemy have smashed every ordinary explanation, this book must use the strongest symbols, the most irrational miracles, to ignite a blazing fire of hope. It stands upright, points straight at the most powerful empires of the world, and declares your destruction has never been the final period. The arrogant Babylonians thought their fire had completely burned Israel to ashes. The proud Roman Empire thought its sword had cut Jerusalem so deeply that it could never rise again. But Fourth Baruch smiles and answers at the very moment the city walls collapsed, at the very moment human beings released their grip in despair behind the veil of mystery. God was still quietly holding the pen and writing the rest of the story. And that is exactly why the Ethiopian and Eritrean churches held tightly to this book with their whole life, placing it solemnly in the very heart of the Ethiopian Bible. While most of the world endured the tragic ending of the Book of Jeremiah, weeping before the ruins, and quickly closing the book because the pain was too great, Ethiopia insisted on turning to the next page to read the remainder. They preserved this text as a life raft for future generations. They wanted to engrave one truth into memory, no matter how bitterly life throws you into exile, no matter how cruelly adversity flattens your homeland and takes away everything you treasure. Remember this: your time is not measured by the clock of the enemy. Your time rests safely in the warm palm of God. The tyrant does not have the right to speak the final sentence. Destruction, death, and injustice never have the right to pronounce the ending. That right belongs to one being alone: the Creator himself, the one fully able to send a giant eagle tearing across the desert sky. The one who can keep a basket of fresh fruit preserved for 66 long years is the one who holds the master key, and he will use it to throw open the door of hope, letting light pour in at the very darkest moment when you are collapsing and certain that everything has ended forever. But remember, the familiar Western Bible stops at the number 66. Ethiopia, meanwhile, preserves a much broader and more massive tradition. 81 books, including 46 books of the Old Testament and 35 books of the New Testament. This list contains Enoch, Jubilees, Tobit, Judith, Meqabyan, Fourth Baruch, as well as books of church law, the Book of the Covenant, Clement the Didascalia, and the entire Synodos. This exposes a shocking truth. Ethiopia did not simply pick up a few strange texts from the margins and randomly shove them into the Bible. They are holding an entire ancient Christian ecosystem. A world where history angels, evil spirits, morality, church law, and the secrets of spiritual survival all exist together within the Ge'ez treasury. If we were to put every single book under a magnifying glass, now this video would turn into a documentary series lasting dozens of hours. So before we move into the final closing blow, we need to do a fast forward. Let us quickly move through 4 major remaining pieces in Ethiopia's secret archive. They do not share one theme, and they do not belong to the same genre. But when you place them together, you will see that the Western theological system looks exactly like a version that has been brutally cut down. The first piece, the Book of Tobit, the battle against the enemy right inside the bedroom. In the Ethiopian Bible, Tobit sits firmly in the Old Testament right before the Book of Judith. This is a direct slap against the Western Protestant system because they threw Tobit straight out of the 66-book list and labeled it Apocrypha. Many modern believers have not even heard the name before. The story opens in the setting of the Assyrian exile. In Nineveh, Tobit is a blind poor man, yet he firmly holds on to righteousness. At the same time in Media, a woman named Sarah is living in an earthly hell. She has been married 7 times, and all 7 husbands died horribly on the wedding night before the marriage could even be completed. The being behind this bloody tragedy is Asmodeus, a lustful demon who destroys marriage and attacks the sanctity of the family directly. This is precisely why Tobit carries such terrifying practical power. It pulls spiritual warfare out of distant deserts, pulls demons out of hell, and places them right at the edge of your marriage bed. To rescue Sarah, God sends the archangel Raphael to accompany Tobias, the son of Tobit. Tobias catches a large fish in the Tigris River. Raphael teaches him an exorcistic method. Take the heart and liver of this fish and place them on burning coals. The rising smoke will drive away the troubling evil spirit forever. Tobias obeys. On the wedding night, the smoke rises, Asmodeus screams and flees, and Raphael binds him. Afterward, the gall of that same fish is used to heal Tobit's blind eyes. This detail made Western theologians furious. It was too practical, too physical, and they mocked it as folk magic. The West wanted an abstract religion, clean, neat, and easier to control. But Ethiopia preserved Tobit because it teaches a survival lesson. Demons can attack the body, the bedroom, and your family. But God can use even the smallest physical things, a fish, a cloud of smoke, an act of obedience to scatter the forces of darkness. Faith does not only live in the mind, it must enter the bedroom step onto the dinner table and intervene directly in physical suffering. The second piece, the Book of the Covenant, Mashafakidan, the secret of the 40 days after the resurrection. Have you ever wondered during the 40 days after rising from the dead, before ascending to heaven, what did Jesus do and teach his disciples? The Western Bible is almost completely silent about this enormous gap, but Ethiopia has no such gap. They have the Book of the Covenant. In the expanded New Testament of the Ethiopian Church, this book contains the final top-secret conversations between Jesus and the apostles. Here, he does not merely preach on a hillside. He reveals every secret of the universe, the structure of hell, the laws of the angels, the judgment of the last day, and the strictest survival instructions, so the church would not be destroyed after he departed. The West set this book aside because it considered it late and outside the original apostolic authorship. But Ethiopia sees it as a survival map. Every teaching in those 40 days is like an urgent testament establishing laws to protect people who are about to be thrown into a hostile world. The third piece, the Book of Clement Kelamentos, the timeline map of the universe. Do not confuse this book with the letters of the Roman bishops. Ethiopia's Kelamentos is a black box containing the entire history of the universe. It tells of the Apostle Peter receiving direct revelation from God and passing it on to Clement. This book functions like a radar, scanning the whole landscape. It rewinds history all the way back to the moment the world was created, describes the fall of the angels, establishes laws for the church on earth, and looks ahead to the terrifying warnings of the end times. The West sees the New Testament as closing with the Book of Revelation. But Ethiopia preserves this additional book as a practical operating manual. It turns the Bible from a book of history into a complete operating system with laws, discipline, and clear warnings for every age. The final piece, Synodos, the Iron Law Code of the Apostles. This is the section many people find the hardest to handle, but it is extremely important. The Synodos group consists of 8 books regarded by the Ethiopian Church as the supreme body of legal authority. The Corpus Juris Ecclesiastici. It does not tell distant fantasies. It is an iron law code. It intervenes in every corner of community life: who has the right to manage money, who may perform baptism, how should husbands and wives treat one another, how must hypocrites be punished, how should a sinful bishop be handled? How should the date of Easter be calculated correctly? Why did the West leave it outside? Because the West built its own bodies of canon law created by popes and councils across many centuries. They did not want to be bound by this original law code. But Ethiopia preserved Synodos to remind us of a harsh truth: a community may speak about angels, demons, and visions. But if it lacks iron discipline, that community will rot from within. Faith cannot be allowed to float in emotion. It must be pressed into the framework of action. When you step back and place these 4 pieces together, you will see a razor-sharp picture. If Enoch Jubilees and the Kebra Nagast show you the heavens' history and the Ark of the Covenant, then Tobit, the Book of the Covenant. Clement and Synodos go straight into the bedroom, the dinner table, the way money is spent, the laws of marriage, and the way demons are driven out of your home. That is why the Ethiopian Bible overwhelms modern people. It does not merely expand the number of books to 81. It expands the entire lens through which a human being survives in this universe. And if the 4 books we just moved through were only a fast-forward glimpse, then they raise one final and heaviest question. How many other deadly secrets are still waiting to be excavated in Ethiopia's treasury? And what will happen when the Western world suddenly realizes that the 66-book Bible they are holding in their hands may only be a shortened version stripped of its most powerful weapons? Now take one step back and look directly at the whole picture. We have gone from the fallen angels who taught mankind how to make weapons in the Book of Enoch, to the cosmic clock of Jubilees, precise down to the very second. We have witnessed Adam and Eve struggling to survive in the darkness, seen the Ark of the Covenant brought to Africa, and stood in silence before a basket of fruit that remained fresh for 66 years in the middle of national collapse and exile. You have seen all the things the West calls apocrypha, forbidden, and unofficial. And at this point, the answer to the title, "Why was the Ethiopian Bible forbidden?" has become clearer than ever. It was not because these books are fake. It was not because they lack historical value. They were pushed to the margins because they are too dangerous for a system that wants to control human beings. The religious elites of empires have always desired a tidy Bible. They needed 66 books trimmed down neatly enough to be managed with ease. They wanted to establish a monopoly system, one where male clergy sit on thrones to distribute forgiveness, while the crowd below simply sits silently in the pews, obeys, and pays for absolution. But the 81 books of Ethiopia shattered that system. The Ethiopian Bible refuses to let faith be turned into a tool of rule. It places power into the hands of the weakest people. It says that a widowed woman can take up a sword with her own hands and end the enemy of a nation. It says that an unknown father would rather be burned alive in a furnace than ever bow before the king's idol. And it declares that your salvation does not rest in the hands of popes in Rome. It rests within your own conscience, and you have the right to step directly before the Creator. That is the true nature of faith. The Ethiopian Bible does not paint an illusion where all you need to do is pray, and every storm will pass. It throws you into the battlefield. It tells you the harsh truth: the devil is standing right beside your bed. Empires will always try to force you to kneel, and there will be times when your faith is tested by blood, fire, and exile. But along with that harshness comes an undying hope. This battle may be brutal, but you are never alone. The God worshipped by Ethiopia is not an abstract being locked inside the four walls of a church. He is the living God, the one who is willing to send an angel to drive demons out of your wedding chamber, the one who is ready to lift you up when you are so desperate outside the Garden of Eden that you want to end your own life, and the one who can send an eagle across the desert sky just to carry a message that says, "I have not forgotten you." History is always written by the victors. The West redrew the theological map of humanity, pushed Africa to the margins, and locked the Bible at the number 66. But they could not erase Ethiopia. That resilient land in the Horn of Africa held tightly to the 81 books with its own life. They preserved them in the ancient language of Ge'ez, carved them into churches hewn from single mountains of stone, and defended them with the blood of martyrs. They preserved them not only for themselves, they preserved them for you, for us, for those who thirst to seek the most ancient truth of humanity. So when you close the story today, ask yourself one question. If a power system spent thousands of years hiding these powerful spiritual weapons from your hands, what else are they still hiding from you? Truth is never destroyed. It is only waiting for people courageous enough to open it. Thank you for watching today's video to the very end. If you are ready to continue searching for hidden truths, please subscribe and leave a comment below so you can walk with us on the journeys ahead. See you again.